Okay, this is episode 19 of Counterpoints. No guest, no third box for today. It's just me, Moses, the usual, the dynamic duo. Yeah, back to the basics. Our rapport, or lack thereof, will attempt to carry the show with no interruptions from any guests. No, the thing is, obviously, a lot of the people who kind of we pull from for this show for guests are aware EPICENTER. That's like the big event going on. And in fact, in a world where there wasn't E-League, I'm sure me and Moses would probably be at EPICENTER as well. I mean, I'll leave it to the fans to determine who we'd be replacing and who wouldn't have made the cut. So
subtle.
I'm not going to say who it is, but there's people out there. And it's the fact that I even think of it that way. It's fucked up, isn't it?
You motherfucker. Just, what was that? The backstabbing picture you wanted? We just start fading people out as they get eliminated?
Yeah. So, while we're here, though, that means because of the bizarre format of EPICENTER, where they have 2 days off between the group stage and the playoffs, we actually get a very rare chance to do analysis of the group stage, but we're not at the event, so we don't have the time constraints of those other guys. And then on top of it, we get to do a real, like, as long as we want in theory, on the actual the bracket play. So we're going to start off with EPICENTER. Now, if everyone remembers, the last episode was the one with Yanko, and we made our group stage predictions in this one. We picked who we thought would do well. So we'll start with Group A, and this was the most stacked one. This was the one where, I mean, I think everyone agrees the parity in this group was insane. Ironically, parity in this group, I guess not ironically, it's exactly what you should expect. So opposite of irony. But what's ridiculous is the parity in this group's insane, and indeed, Moses, they tied every single series. Everyone won 1-1. So first thoughts on that, everyone going 1-1.
That's crazy. They all go 1-1. It was actually kind of I read something on that after like the first day that VP was the only team to win their own map pick in general, which is pretty nuts. But I mean, that just goes to show. I think a lot of these teams as well, with like the struggles we know, like Navi has been having with their map pool, G2 just seeming flat. That's not surprising that they split their games, because some of the games weren't even like close. Like they either like won big or lost big. It was like 16-6, 16-7. So it was very much kind of like who was just showing up on this map. It was a lot of inconsistency, I felt, when I was watching some of these VODs.
Yeah, and obviously the key issue here is if you actually sat down and thought about, like when I did my video on this topic, where I obviously had to wreck EPICENTER over the tiebreaker format, because for anyone who doesn't know, okay, like a lot of tournaments, the first tiebreaker is actually head-to-head, but since they were all tied anyway, no one had a head-to-head record, so instead they had to go to the second tiebreaker criterion, which is round difference, basically. And the problem with that, obviously, is that even in a normal tournament, I don't like that to decide who wins and loses anyway, but even worse in a tournament like this, where essentially you're counting up the round difference of every single game played by everyone on different maps starting on different sides. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an obvious problem. And so, unfortunately, I have to say as well, like, it is true that usually you would never have a group where the teams were this evenly matched anyway. So you would never get like 4 teams tied like this. You can maybe have 2 or 3. That can happen, sure. But I have to say, looking back now, knowing how close the teams are in terms of like skill, it already was a flawed concept to have it just be best of 2. Because in that scenario, like in a world where it's best of 3, someone has to win the series. And also, remember, in a best of 3 where both teams are quite evenly matched, unless there's like a mad map imbalance or something, you're often going to get third maps. I mean, it happens a lot in playoff series, like someone wins 1, but they can't keep it up and it goes to three maps. So in a way, I can't totally blame EPICENTER, although I do think it's a bad system and no one should use it again. I hope this is like a lesson to everyone. But, I mean, there is a part of you could figure out, well, what do you think the worst case scenario is? What would happen if this happened,
That's an issue. I mean, this has been an issue with all tournament organizers, though, in every facet of running tournaments, right? Is where they don't think of like the worst case scenario, like think of the scheduling. They just hope,
right?
Yeah, it's just like, please, everything go right. I personally, I just hate. Why are so many leagues right now doing these best of 2s? I hate this system. I hate watching 2 maps between a team and they split, and it feels like it was just like a waste of time. It feels like you didn't accomplish anything. I know EPL kind of does it. Those are technically 2 best of 1 matches back to back. I think ECS does the BO2. EPICENTER just did the BO2. Sivo used to do the BO2. Like I don't understand why that's caught so much fire. I don't know why everyone's going to that. It's got to be like scheduling or something.
It is, but that's one thing. For example, they don't want a third map because they don't want it to be like you can't account for how long the matches are going to last. So in theory, they want it to be like 1 map each. in theory, like it's a map for each of you, depending on the league, you know, sometimes you get to pick the map. And they want it to just be like, it's over in a set amount of time. Like, here's something people don't realize. Best of 2 as a format actually works quite well in League of Legends, because even though in League of Legends it's unsatisfying because you don't get the third map, the reason why it's good is because, you know, they only have one map, right? It's just the game League of Legends. And what people don't know is that at different times in history, depending on the meta in League of Legends, one side is nearly always favored. And usually, by like, one side wins like 60% of games, no matter who's playing there.
You mean like blue versus red side or something?
Yeah. So as a result, basically just whether you start on the left or the right side of the map.
Yeah.
So as a result, by doing a best of 2, for League of Legends, bizarrely, it can actually be good for the group stage because each of you just gets one turn on the dominant side, basically. And as a result, it takes away some of the imbalance inherent in League of Legends. But as you can see by the way I'm describing this, that doesn't exist in CS. We already have a system in CS because we've purposely designed our map pool to allow best of 1s to be banned all the way down to the last map. That's the whole reason we always have 5 or 7 maps. We don't ever have 4 or 6 or 8 because we literally designed the map pool to allow banning down to one map in case you want to play best of 1, and then in best of 3 series to allow banning down, well, depending on, we do it with phases now, but so that you have a map picked each and then a third decided. So essentially, we've actually kind of taken care of a lot of the issues that another game would have built into the game just by designing the map pool that way. So the big issue I come to in this scenario is one of the things that people will say about a tiebreaker here is obviously like, oh, well, that adds an extra match, like you don't have time. Unfortunately, Epicenter can't really say that, can they? Because they've got the 2 extra days.
Yeah. Yeah, that they have so much. That was I'm assuming that's venue related that they had to try and change something. But yeah, having these 2 days off, like why aren't you extending everything? Like why isn't this being done a little bit better? The BO3s throughout the whole series. I mean, round differential in general, like we've been through this so many times where even just using that as a tiebreaker, like that just as a product of this system, and now we have something where every team has the same win-loss record and one team had to get eliminated. It just feels so cheap. It feels like the results of that group are just so. I just hate the standings of it. That NIP goes out even though they're 3-3 with every other team, even though they split all their series. Yeah. That is such a fucking. Imagine how bad of a feeling that's got to be for the NIP players at the tournament. Like they did just as good as everyone else, but they're the ones knocked out.
No, it's absolutely whack. And as soon as anyone starts to go, well, they didn't do just as well. They didn't get as many rounds in the round. Like, shut the fuck up, mate. That's not no pro player would tell you that's a legit criteria. Right? I don't know anyone who would agree with that. And it's interesting actually in this case. Like, here's the thing. Okay, it's true. Sometimes pros don't come out in favor of other pros. Like when it's something that they think's an outrage. You know, sometimes they just say, well, that's his problem, not mine. But if people like, for example, so here's a good example. So Virtus.pro won their group, right? They won outright. They were one of the teams who did, like, they 2-0'd SK, so very good. So if they wanted to, think of the history of that team. Someone like Taz could come out and be like, listen, stop whining, you know, like, I think the top format's fine. Like, if you were better, you'd win. These are the sorts of things that in different circumstances or different rule, maybe he would say something like that. It's been known in the past, you know. Whereas actually, interestingly enough, sure, other teams didn't come out in favour of NIP, you know, because I think some of them, unfortunately, because, by the way, this is a trend in CS as well. If the tournament treats you very well, it's a lot less likely that players will publicly complain about other things. If you give them a nice room and food and all the rest of it, and maybe a bar tab,
everyone's
people won't
complain.
Happier. Yeah. And so, with that said, it's not like teams came out in favour and like, oh yeah, this is all bullshit, etc. But there was also no one said it was good, put it that way. Like, there was even...
No. Guardian liked it.
That's whether he liked that aspect of the format, though. I think he liked the fact that his team won the group. I can see why he liked that aspect of it. He basically, what you're saying is, Moses, Guardian liked that he got to win and lose as many games as NIP and win the group and go to the semis. Meanwhile, NIP, who won and lost as many games as him, are out of the motherfucking tournament and enjoying Moscow.
How mad is it? I think Navi played a match. I'm pretty sure they were playing a match at one point where the results, like if they lost, they would be eliminated, and if they won, they would win the group. Like, how is that all based on just one map? Like, that's the kind of system that I think is so crazy. And obviously, if he loses that and they get knocked out of the group, I don't think Guardian says that in the interview.
Oh no, I think it was the NIP match. I think it was the last map for them. Yeah, I think that was the map that decided it.
It's like you lose, you're gone, and you win it. Oh, look, you're in the semifinals automatically. Like not even just qualifying for the next stage. They're in the semifinals, so they're automatically top 4. That's madness that you can go from being eliminated to top 4 just based off one map.
Because here's what people don't realize is that I made this point in my video, but unfortunately, any fan that came along, like basically after the first year and a half of the game, which is obviously almost everyone, like 99% of people listening right now came along at least 2015 or 2014 onwards, right? What they don't know is, before Lurpus made an article about GSL system, which is basically where you just have a little double limb bracket inside the group, until he made that article, we never used to have that. Except we had like the major or whatever. Like, okay, in fact, actually, I realised I've just got my dates wrong. It must have been 2013, someone that they did that, because before the major. Okay, so until the majors in that tournament, we never had GSL system, right, in CS of any kind. In fact, it used to famously, in all the latter day 1.6 tournaments, it used to always be round robin, best of one. Now, what's funny is the reason why I think actually people picked up the GSL system because of Lurpus' article isn't because of all the good reasons I like. For example, like no tiebreakers and these sorts of things. I think the main reason they picked it up is because one good point was, imagine a GSL system without best of threes, right? It's just best of one the whole way. You can actually convince the tournament organizer, because what you tell him is, in a round robin, you actually have 6 total maps get played. But in a best of one GSL system, you only play 5 maps. So you say to him, listen, mate, I'm gonna solve your whole tournament here. I'm gonna let you schedule when the games are. I'm gonna give you one less map you have to play, and I'm gonna make it so you never have tiebreaker problems. Right? If you tell a tournament organizer
they love that.
He's gonna be on board with you, right? So the funny thing is, true, we did modify it later. So now, for example, you can have 7 maps played because we have a best of 3 as the decider, and obviously it can be 3 maps there. But so the time aspect actually hasn't now been saved. That's kind of like been offset to some degree. But with that said, in general, people eventually took to the GSL system and they were liking it. But I have noticed, I don't know if you've seen this, but in the last year or so, there was people turning against it. And in fact, people asking for this to return. Like, I want round robins back, and I want these, I don't, because for example, one thing that people always got salty over is, say their team got eliminated in last place. They'd be like, oh, it's bullshit. I got eliminated after 2 maps. And you know what? I never even got to play all 3 games. Like, here's the thing. I agree. Those are 2 negatives, right? In my dream world, we'd have like Star Ladder earlier this year, right? Where it was basically the same as EPICENTER, but it was a GSL best of 3 in the group stage because they had longer time as well. And then the bracket was this cool bracket where, second and third play, like the first round and then semis onwards is the winners, okay? So I thought that was like the best of all worlds. But the thing is, my main problem is, there are pros and cons to both, but the difference is, GSL style never has what I call the most unsatisfying ones, which is you lose because of a tiebreaker, you lose because of round difference, these sorts of weird ones,
That's what I would think is the reason why round robin is cool to watch, because I know Katowice this year had the round robin group. That was the first time in a long time I think we saw with 6 teams at each one, and then Pro League is going to have.
It's just that we got lucky there that there weren't tie breaks. That's
that's the thing. If there's not tie breaks, then some of those later matches are epic because they're best of ones to decide so much. And also, I mean, if there's even a single upset, then all of a sudden there's so much pressure on whichever the favorite teams got upset earlier, and then all of a sudden their backs against the wall. So it does kind of create a little bit more of like a high pressure situation, like for fans to get excited about the group stage. But definitely, I don't think that outweighs the problems that come when there's a tiebreaker. Because whenever there's a tiebreaker, some team always gets screwed. Like it just happens. Like someone's always going to get fucked. I don't know if there's a way to do something like this, and instead of saying, all right, Nips round differential, like they're eliminated, what if they did something like Nip and Dignitas had the 2 worst round differentials in the group? What about like a 1-map playoff to see who moves on? Like make them play for this spot at least.
Yeah, actually, here's the thing, okay? That's not bad, because I agree. Another problem EPICENTER ran into is in a normal tiebreaker, it probably is 2 teams tied, right? So then you just say, right, well, I'll just play 1 map. I agree. I will agree with this for EPICENTER. Because they set up their system and they got literally the worst possible scenario where everyone tied, even if they only did best of ones, they would have to have a tiebreaker between all 4 teams. So like I described before, they'd have to play like essentially a gang of maps. So I agree, that is implausible. You can't do that even with tiebreakers. Like even with their extra days, which again, they might not be allowed in the venue, you have to add that in.
Right.
It's true, that is untenable. But I actually like your idea, because your idea essentially takes the gist of something I mentioned in my video, which was someone made the point, okay, that if you're doing tiebreakers because you want to save time, you don't want to have to play a tiebreaker, you want to use a format. He said to him, at least make it so that you're only using a tiebreaker where you don't play, where it's like 2 teams that are already in the playoffs anyway, and you're deciding who's 1 and 2. Because then no one can really go super ham complaining. His problem was, if it's who gets into the playoffs and who's out the fucking tournament, now it feels like you have to, in that scenario, do a tiebreaker that's a game, So I agree in this sense here, because essentially what we'd be doing here is, we eliminate some matches by saying, well, you're the 2 worst teams in terms of like round differential or rounds 1 or whatever the one you're going to use is, And then we just have the bottom 2 teams, because we're trying to eliminate one team, play a best of one, and then the loser goes. I think that's also a compromise that makes sense. But again, by the way, I mean, this goes without saying, but let's say it anyway. You obviously have to do that for the next Epicenter. You can't do it now. Like Epicenter were, right? You can't just go, well, rules are fucked, so yeah, halfway through the tournament, I'm just going to change them. That obviously can't be done either. Like, this has to be for next time, you know.
Yeah, all things considered, and props to them. I mean, they handled that probably just as well as you could have. This kind of nightmare scenario of this group of all ties. I mean, they just come out and said, "Yep, we won't be doing it again. This is causing a lot more problems than it saved." And yeah, we got to stick through it this time, and we're going to bite the bullet. But next time, we're definitely not sticking with it. So they handled it just about as well as I've seen a tournament organizer do something like that.
Like here, I've got an example for you, okay? So you mentioned actually the big tournament that used round robin was IEM Katowice this year. Now, admittedly, they had 6-team groups, so you give yourself a much better chance that like there's not going to be too many mad ties. But it's very often the case when you have tiebreak round robin groups that you will get a tie, okay? So I've got one here that could have happened, okay? So in the Group A, that was the super stacked one. That was the one with Luminosity, Fnatic, Na'Vi, Mouse, Nip, Mongols. Like basically, Mongols are the obvious whipping boys. They did lose every game. Mouse, actually, that was one of the events where Nico was like really going sick, so they had a chance, you know. But really, that was like where the top 3 teams that got out were the right 3 teams. They were the really sick teams in the world, you know. They were like top 3 in the world, arguably. But here's an interesting detail. Because you use head-to-head first, right, Na'Vi, who got out in 3rd, were 3-2 in games, and Nip ended up in 5th because they only won 2 and lost 3 games. So if I go back and I look, Na'Vi actually beat Nip only 16-13 on Overpass, right? So if Na'Vi loses that, Nip and Na'Vi would be tied. But because Nip would have won the head-to-head, it would have been Nip in the playoffs and not Na'Vi. Just because Na'Vi lost the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's...
Actually, that doesn't make sense. Nip would have gone through by actually winning, having 3-2. Right, whatever, you get the point anyway. There could have been a scenario where essentially just the tiebreaker would be head-to-head. And in this scenario, when you play them once, it's just whoever won that match. So it wouldn't matter, for example, if you'd beaten the group leader. Somehow you get punished because you lost to that one opponent. So again, unfortunately with that, the key issue there is there's 2 details. One, it's just arbitrary, literally. You're just deciding, like, this is the one factor I'm going to criteria. Even though the whole concept of the group was you play everything, I'm going to make your whole tournament on this one thing. And then secondly, and this is the key detail to make, is that no one can ever really plan for how these tiebreakers are at the beginning of the tournament. And that's my big problem, you know. Like, you can't plan if it's based on head-to-head, because then you try to win every map. You can't plan if it's based on rounds, because then in theory you should actually just play economically for rounds. In this situation here, like, in theory, in a mad way, it doesn't matter if you beat the group leader, if actually you just had to win that one game against an opponent who you won't know if they're going to be tied until the end. So that's another problem I have to add in. Anyone who says, yeah, but you know, the tiebreaker rules exist, you could all read them. Yeah, but you can't know when it's going to apply. So you can't really plan for it.
I think the interesting thing about the entire concept of round robin groups in tournaments is that, I mean, it's being used next week at Pro League Finals in Brazil, and the players are the one who chose that format. That WISA Player Council is the one that came together and said, we want to have, we want to increase teams at the Pro League Finals from 8 to 12, and we want to make the groups round robin like Katowice was. They wanted to use that format, and all this has been obliged. So this is the format the players chose. So I mean, coming up, and even here, when you see complaints from players about the system, it's like, yeah, but you guys did choose the system for the next tournament. Like, this is, you guys wanted round robin, so you have to take the bad with the good now.
I have to say, I'm not a fan of it.
I don't mind it for event. I would never want it for like a major or anything like that. But I mean, I don't mind it for an event here and there. I think the GSL groups are much better. And by the way, one other mad inconvenience to this kind of a format, which we haven't really even touched on, is how fucking confusing all the following the groups are. Like, if you're just a casual fan tuning in and you want to know the significance of a match, like, how confusing is that to have to, like...
Oh, in this one, you mean, in the Epicenter one?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no one could really tell you, right?
Any round robin, like, Lurpus was tweeting out all the different options as it was going on, like, trying to do the math, and even the analysts and the casters are just like, yeah, we don't fucking know. 16-11 or 16-12, whatever it might have been, they need to win by.
That's another example, by the way, of what I love about GSL. You always know where you are in the tournament, and you can tell someone who's a beginner, you tell them this, okay, win 2 matches, you're through, lose 2 matches, you're out.
Oh, and one other thing we haven't brought up, because I just recalled that Henry actually brought this up on the desk, and it's a very good point. At a certain point during round-robin groups, you get to a stage with some of these matches where he mentioned like there's like Fnatic going into their last matches like could have lost a map on purpose to
fuck with the
play
seedings,
G2 or Dignitas, or like those were the two options. So it's like there is an opportunity at times during round robin to kind of pick your poison. And like, no, I don't think any teams
which it goes without saying doesn't exist in GSL.
Yeah. So I mean, like there is that kind of a scary position where can you actually like does that count as a throw? Like where's the line between throwing a match and that actually being a tournament strategy?
I mean, here's the problem. I can actually tell you already. Famously in StarCraft, that used to literally happen in Brood War, the one where the Koreans were like, forget StarCraft 2. In Brood War, Koreans basically were like uber god dominant, like no one from the West could touch them. So what some of the Koreans have even said in interviews they would do is when it was like a World Cyber Games, you know, like an international tournament where you have like 3 Koreans, but then you have like someone from Germany and someone from America and China. They even admitted that if they knew that they could either throw a match or like a friend could throw a match for them to make sure the Koreans got on different parts of the bracket, they admitted they would do it because they said, well, in this scenario, it's, you know, we're representing our country, so I don't want to knock the Korean out. So they admitted they threw, and I can tell you in 1.6, where we had round robins for almost every tournament, that there was a bunch of famous scenarios where either it came down to one last game and the guy who, you know, had the option to throw knew it got him an easier path, and he would nearly always happen to lose, or the worst one ever. And I'll give you the most egregious example ever, Moses. There was an event in China in 2009, where because in Group A, Fnatic, who was the dominant team of the year and was winning everything, because Group A was played and they finished second, magically, 2 of the 3 other groups had the best team finish second as well, so as not to play Fnatic in the first round in the random draw. Now,
imagine that.
In that scenario, that's why I say it's egregious, because in that situation, both those teams, I think it was like Mouse Sports and like maybe the Poles, actually, I think Neo even might have told me it privately, they both were essentially like, bearing in mind, Fnatic might win this tournament, I will take the chance to get the second prize money by going on the other side of the bracket, no matter what it costs, even if it means, in certain cases, I have to lose to a Chinese team that no one thinks I can lose to. Now, luckily, back then, here's the key detail, Moses. Back then, at least, there weren't skins being bet. So no one could go mental like, you just literally threw a game for skin, which obviously would be the end of the world now in CSGO. But, again, the problem we're pointing out here is no one wants to even have to think that. You know, no one wants to have to question if that upset was legit or whether the team threw the game. And I agree, you shouldn't ever really be able to fuck with yours or someone else's position in the tournament based on, like, kind of knowing what the bracket would be, you know?
Do you consider something like that fair play? Like as a tournament strategy?
Here's the problem. Personally, I think it's fine to do actually for the team who's in control, because here's the thing: the tournament it's not banned. Like, it's allowed within the system. That's literally built into the system. It's just a flaw in the system. So for the problem, I have a rule, okay, that goes like this. The good thing I like, in theory, about video games, assuming you don't literally use an aimbot or something external, is that we don't need refs. Like in football, you need a ref because you can do illegal shit on the field of play with your body in space-time, right? Now, that might sound abstract, but think about it in the game. In Counter-Strike, you can't move or do anything that is illegal. Everything is permitted. You can dodge around someone, you can throw a molly, you can walk through it yourself for no reason. You can do all these things because that's the genius thing. We don't need refs. So unfortunately, in this scenario, how are you supposed to gauge if this guy, who, by the way, in the scenario we're talking about, where he'd be better off if he came second than first, okay, how are we supposed to gauge if he was actually trying or not? You can't. Unless you have him hooked up to some mad lie detector or so. Like, there's not really a way. And so at that point in time, as fucked as it sounds, if it was my choice, I mean, people can say this, like, oh, you have to beat every team. Well, no, in that scenario, this is a great example of where you don't. I can actually rig the tournament so I get the easier bracket. So I actually do think, in a mad way, the team should be allowed to do it because it's part of the format.
Yeah, no, I think it's entirely fair play because it's built into that format. I think teams would be silly not to consider those possibilities and not to, you know, explore the option of something like that. And I think when you put people in that competitive environment and they're playing for $500,000, then I think they're going to take every opportunity to get the biggest advantage, no matter how much towing the line it might be. Like,
I mean, dude, God forbid this was in a major, because I tell you right now, almost every team would do it in a major. If they thought, like, if they were in the World, okay, 2015, where Fnatic wins all the majors, and you could get yourself on the other side of the bracket by losing a game, people would do it. I'm telling you right now.
100%, yeah. Especially when you start adding
think
up
how much money you were talking about. Exactly.
All that sticker Skrilla.
And the whole point is, you don't want that to ever be the option.
Yep.
What you want is them to just try and play the game, and this is why I like about GSL, because they're trying to just advance in the tournament, and they're trying to continue on because they've got tournament lives, and you can't fuck around, basically. You have no game spare to throw away and fuck with, you know. So, yeah, I mean, listen, I'll acknowledge there are negatives to GSL system. There are some flaws with it. Like, to make it really fair, for example, I think you have to have best of 3 for all the games. So that I already know some tournament organisers can't run that. It's going to be very, very straining. I acknowledge all of this. It's just that, to me, when you add up that they all have pros and cons, I personally think that GSL system has the least negatives I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably the best system that I can think of. I even like it more than I know a lot of people are liking the Swiss system that started popping up here and there. But I think that GSL system is still the best. As soon as we could find time to have group stages be entirely BO3s, I think that GSL BO3 all the way through would just be an epic series. Yeah. And I would also love it if eventually. This will probably never happen, but when we do things like the majors and we have to have, we now have the elimination matches, our BO3 to knock someone out, I'd much prefer the winners match be the BO3 and have the losers match just be 2 BO1s.
Sure. I mean, if I had the choice, I personally would, because I want to get the best team out of the group.
No, you can't do that, because every team is gonna say we want to be able to be represented and have a fair chance at moving on, which is I understand that as well. But I think it'd be much more. I mean, you should definitely have the bigger challenge to move out of the group in first place.
Well, especially because of the implications to the bracket, etc. Like that's actually something people don't think about, by the way. Just as a side note on that upsets not only get the upset team through, but sometimes they fuck up the other team. Like say the 2 best teams in the world, so like SK Fnatic style scenario at the last group. Well, Fnatic had to come out of that group second. So what if some other team, luckily it didn't happen, had just fluked the first place in the other group,
Isn't that how Gambit got first place? They upset over Astralis and then...
they just won 2 best of 1s.
Yeah, 2 best of 1s, and now they're legends. Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree in that. I mean, there have been tournaments that have done it, like in the past, the GSL, the Gfinities used to run best of 3 all the time. The problem is, I can already tell you, since they had 3-day events, that used to be a real strain. Like, they were just wrecking us for time. So I agree, it's got its downsides. It's just that, like, here's the thing. I do like Swiss system more than round robin. I'll give you that. My problem with Swiss system is that, first of all, at ESL1 New York, we couldn't mention it a lot on the desk, but there was already a problem where, for example, Fnatic was like 1 game ahead of a team, I think it was Optic that they played, where, oh no, maybe, who was it they were playing? I thought it was VP. VP was like 2-1, and Optic was like 1-2, or something mad like that, and yet they played each other, which in theory, I mean, apparently it can happen, obviously, if you have less teams, but my idea of Swiss system is it should be like the amount, which apparently is 16 minimum, where everyone's always playing with the same record. That feels fairer. So I think Swiss system has its own problems. Also, you can add in, you never know who you're going to play. So you have to prep for everyone. Whereas the good thing I think about the 4-team group is, the 3 teams you have to prep for.
Yeah, I don't mind the prep thing so much. I think it's much more fun if you come in and you're not able to prep for teams in the group stage. I think that's kind of cool. Just having to rely on your own practice in your own game and not being able to just like look in and kind of hard counter a team. Not that they have very much time to look into opponents anyways, but yeah, definitely the Swiss system. If the minimum that it's required to properly run the system is 16, probably shouldn't be used at events that don't have the minimum required teams. Because that was I remember that situation. And again, that's much like the round robin system. It's just confusing to figure that out. Yeah. And then also, if you're a viewer, if you're a spectator following this event and you want to follow your team, you don't know who they're going to play next. You don't know what the matchup is until like just before it happens. Because they have to reseed everything. Basically, they have to do all the matchups in between each set. So that's just kind of a little hectic. But yeah. I don't mind it. I liked it at the major qualifiers. So yeah, when it has the appropriate number of teams, Swiss system is pretty cool at times. But
okay,
we haven't even talked about the teams yet.
The tangent there was on Group A, which is the one where everyone was tied. So here's the question. Okay, like even though I agree, by the way they went out, it's not satisfying. It's kind of bullshit. Nip went out in last place, Moses. Yep. Now, I'm not going to crow mad like, I said they come out last, because obviously I didn't predict it would be that way for a start off. But I did think that, unfortunately, here's the thing with Nip, is like, I still think they can be good, and I still think they can have tournaments that they'll be super sick at. It's just I didn't buy the idea that they're just going to do like the Star Series form every event. And the other one, key detail to add, is that I think I'm one of the few people who actually thought G2 wouldn't be as bad as like they seemed at ESL1 New York, So to some degree, both those came to pass. What do you think of the way Group A played out with the 4 different teams?
I mean, the fact they all tied. I still think that this was a team highlighted by weaknesses, really, in terms of Navi's map pool, in terms of the up and down of G2, NIP as well, up and down, and without that, they didn't look like What event did they win when Michael Ailey first came? Was that
Star Series?
Star Series, yeah. I didn't think they looked like that kind of inspired performance. I was actually, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm still impressed with Dignitas, but I was a little bit disappointed they didn't flat out win this group. Just straight up, just because I think of all the teams looking at this, they are the least inconsistent. And I thought for sure they would be able to beat up a little bit on G2. Na'Vi I knew was going to be a struggle, but I just hate this feeling right now that we have so many teams that seem to be like having some critical factor in their lineup that is preventing them from getting to like this upper echelon. Like we've always talked about recently, ever since New York, that the top 3 teams in the world were like Virtus.pro, Na'Vi, and SK, and those were like the 3 like tier 1 teams, and everyone else was kind of like just below that, trying to get up there. I actually kind of almost think it's only Virtus.pro up there at the moment. I don't see any other team having the level of consistency. I don't see any other team, even in individual like matches or from match to match. Like some of these teams, it's just like show up and you win 16-7. Some of the times it's show up and lose 16-5. You're losing on maps that are typically very strong for you, and that's pretty, like Na'Vi losing Mirage to Dignitas like 16-7 or 16-8 or something like that. That was mind blowing to me.
By the way, I will certainly agree with the premise there, because this group typified that. Like in this group, here's the way the story would go in that sense, okay? So I agree. The reason I actually had Dignitas winning this group, or definitely having a very good chance to, and they were the only team I said I guaranteed to get out of the group, is because I looked at Dignitas and they have this deep map pool, they have these consistent players, like they have a lot of the qualities, right, where I actually do still think that they're going to be the next elite team. Like I think they're going to join that top 3, top 4. I think they're going to go higher than we've ever seen this Dignitas core going, and be very, very good in the world. But when you look at the other opponents, so even Na'Vi, definitely G2 and NiP, these are all teams that, when they play well, have a really awesome explosive style, but definitely have flaws. I mean, in Na'Vi, it's the map pool, obviously, and no Starix. In NiP, I mean, they've just got Michael Ailey. They've had their own slump recently. In G2, it's just event to event, whether they can have those stars. So each have an obvious flaw. So as a result, I thought logically, right, let those 3 beat up on each other inconsistently. And then if you Dignitas, you're supposed to just grind it out. And then you should have won this group with 1 win,
4-3,
1 draw, 1 loss, whatever the scenario is, like you said, there's a way that you do it, So I have to say, in a weird way, the rest of them I don't mind. It's fine for them to be up and down. But actually, it is Dig that disappoints me a bit. I mean, the most bizarre thing is, on one level, Moses, they actually showed what I said, which is that they have this insanely deep map pool, because they are one of the teams, by the way, who only won their opponent's pick. So they won all 3 of their opponents' pick, but then you can see where the other side's going to come in now, right? Which is, that's great, and on its own, that's like 1 step to becoming one of the best teams in the world. Problem is, when you then lose all of your picks, including a nuke pick, by the way,
I was going to bring that up,
which is your wild card, right? When you then lose it to Na'Vi, who's only just started practicing nuke, that's like, okay, I give you credit that you got the super deep map pool, but this is something I said about Dig. It's weird. They're one of the only teams I've ever seen that had every map, but at the same time, don't necessarily have the map that's like the home map that they can win every time. So it is literally a jack of all trades, master of none type mad scenario for Dignitas right now.
Yeah, the fact that they lost Nuke to Na'Vi is actually pretty frightening, because they were the team that I think if you look at every team in the pro circuit right now, you say they have the best Nuke. Like it'd be between them and VP, but I think Dignitas has shown like a little bit more strength over.
Well, they played a lot more, right?
Yeah. Losing that to Na'Vi, and then also, I mean, narrowly winning against NIP on it, 16-12. So that's a little bit worrying, but it's just kind of crazy. I mean, they're able to beat G2 on Dust 2, and then they lose to them on Overpass. They're able to beat Na'Vi on Mirage, and then lose on Nuke. So, yeah, I expected them, because they have so many pieces, and the way they're playing together right now is really, really cool. And I'm not sure I see another team that can really match the level of teamwork that they're putting out right now, because they do have, Magus Boy and Config who are playing really well, and they're putting these players in like the important positions. Like Config's playing like the connector position on Mirage, which is probably the most important defensive spot there is on the map. And then he's paired up with like Rubino over on Catwalk, so they're putting like a weaker player with their star player, and instead of like. It's not to hide the deficiencies of the other player. It's to like bring out the best qualities, to make that star player take the brunt of the effort in defending that position, and then the other player, just plays off of that. And they're doing it so well. And then we're seeing that Cajun B as well. That has been so dominant at times in his playing career. So I mean, just the tools and the way that they're playing at the moment as a team is really impressive from Dignitas, and that's why it is a little bit of a bummer that they're not able to actually just squeak out in first place and get to the semis, because now they're going to have a rough semifinals matchup.
Okay, I mean, we'll get to the actual matches themselves. Yep. We'll go through Group B before we get on that.
Yep.
But obviously, we'll pick back up on Dignitas when we get there. Because, I mean, I'll get to it when I get to that part. Okay, so in Group B, this was the one where, I mean, coming in, we did say this. Like, what's mad is Group B was the one that was supposed to be easy to predict. It's supposed to be VP and SK decide between themselves who comes first. And then, in theory, these are the three that everyone has getting out anyway, right? It's VP, Fnatic. It's supposed to be VP, SK 1-2, and Fnatic third. Now, instead, because of this mad scenario where VP were the ones who beat SK, even though Fnatic just drew all their series, they actually got out in second. So what do you think of Group B and how that played out?
Wait, how did that happen? Fnatic in second. Was that head-to-head over SK or something?
Let me see.
Because they have...
Yeah, but it gone to round difference because it was a draw.
Okay.
Because they each have 3 points.
Yep. This group, I think... First of all, surprised that Hellraiser is able to take a map off Fnatic, but I think again, I mean, I think the story of this group, once again, that Virtus.pro has established itself essentially at this point. You know, you have to consider them. I mean, we have to wait till the event finishes, but you have to consider them the best team in the world over SK at the moment because SK is not playing like it. They haven't for a while. That break really hurt them. But also the story comes out with Fallen's interview that they're having big internal issues, like big personality, motivation issues, whatever it might be. I think that's the big story, is this fall from grace for SK in recent times. Now, I mean, I don't want it to seem all like doom and gloom, like they're not dead in the water, obviously, okay, but yeah. This is a lineup that just... Remember how when Fnatic was dominant, we always said they had that one magical round late in matches? SK never had those rounds, but like you always knew that the system that SK plays in would grind out the win, no matter like if they were down 3 rounds, down 4 rounds. You knew at some point there was going to be a breaking point, and that system would just grind their opponent down in the end. And we don't see that now. Now we see uncharacteristic flaws where they lose situations in like 4-on-3s, which, you know, very rarely does that happen. Where in a 4-on-1 they chase after the gun and lose 3 players to it and ruin themselves economically. By the way, that's also a bigger impact in round robin where the round numbers matter than it would be in like any kind of like GSL system. So those kind of mistakes that SK is normally very, very good at preventing could have hurt them much, much worse than it did if they were perhaps in the Group A instead of Group B. They're very fortunate, I think, that they had Hellraisers as kind of a buffer there.
And you also have to add in as well, like, here's a weird thing, okay? This is where, when I say this, people are going to think you're overanalyzing it, etc. But okay, so we'd also heard behind the scenes similar rumors, like maybe there's some sort of internal conflicts within SK, which, by the way, doesn't always mean the end of the world. It just means like players aren't getting along, or even worse, they disagree. And I can tell you from knowing Brazilian players and Brazilian people throughout MMA, esports, all sorts of different sports, that because they have that very passionate flair to how they talk, it means that when they argue, especially if you don't understand their language, if they're talking in Portuguese, it's a bit like if you ever see Italian people argue, okay? They might not actually be saying like, you know, fuck you, like, I'm never going to talk to you again or whatever, but they're so like there's gestures everywhere, and it's you'd think if you didn't know the language, like, holy shit, that guy's going completely, you know what I mean? It might just be like an enthusiastic discussion, you know. So, but the problem I want to make here is, this will sound weird, right? Is someone made the point like, actually after one of the games, you know, they all like shook hands and like dapped it up, but then like I think it was like Fur and Taco didn't even like acknowledge each other, or whatever. Now here's the funny thing. Normally I'd say no big deal, right? But this is one of those areas where, you know, teams nowadays have these mad rituals where, like, you know, everyone has to fucking do a fist bump down the line. Everyone has to do a high five. It's
the free throw.
Well, here's the funny thing. It means that then when you randomly don't do that, it looks conspicuous, because in every other scenario, you're doing it every time, no matter what. So I actually, believe it or not, I put something in that. I think there is probably some mild friction between certain players. And by the way, again, not the end of the world, you don't dap it up, but that obviously is not how it used to be. There used to be this like brotherly vibe to the team, right? That was one of the things that they had going for them.
Yeah, I know that little family facade is starting to crumble. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I always look at it as, because we've had this discussion, not on the show, but like about how SK, this is like their year where they were like clearly the number one team, and to a certain degree they were dominant, but it didn't feel the same as Fnatic's dominance, because I know we talked about in the last show, SK's never won 2 tournaments in a row.
Except the DreamHack Austin and then one of the other two. So not 2 international tournaments.
Right. But like they're just their style, because they're so tactical and they go so much about practice. I mean, even leading into Cologne, when their practice was like 6 hours of demo watching and theory crafting, and then like 2 or 3 hours of playing. Like very much the focus on the tactical and the mind games, and you know, just, you know what everyone's going to be doing, the fundamentals. That style, because it takes so much out of you as players, it's so time consuming. You can't be as dominant as Fnatic was, because Fnatic's like freewheeling like individual style was literally just, you know, hop into a fucking tournament and win. Like there were tournaments that they didn't even practice. Like there was that story about Crims where he had like 10 hours of CS:GO 2 weeks leading up to an event, and he was the MVP. So that like when you don't have that individual dominance, the way that Fnatic did as SK, because you're dominating as a team and tactically, it takes so much more work. And I think that's the big thing. It's very time consuming for a team like that to get to the top and then also stay there. And I think that's where they're struggling with it, being able to put all that work in between tournaments. And now, they all went home after a break. They all went home after the last major, and they did things with the family, the friends. They've been preoccupied. They had Fur gone. I know what Fallen released his brand of keyboards or accessories or something, the Fallen brand. So, I mean, he probably had a bunch of business things on his mind. So I think literally it's just a case of them not focusing on Counter-Strike very much in these past 2 months.
I mean, ironically, listen, for all I know, it could be a good keyboard, but I mean, why would you buy a special keyboard to play? I mean, only pussies would do anything to win. And memed. Okay, not bad, right? I didn't even.
That's pretty good.
Not bad. Okay. No, here's the thing I want to point out though as well is like one really good sign for, believe it or not, I've got one ray of hope for everyone who's an SK fan, which is that actually Coldzera is back to being really good. He's having a great performance because obviously in New York, despite how far they went in New York, he was actually the one who really underperformed for his role, I mean, for him, he can still have a bad tournament for him and it can be an okay tournament for another player. Yeah. But he was not a superstar in New York. He's playing like, the old Coldzera now. So I'm really back on that. The problem is, it's a bunch of the other players who are having really bad tournaments. Like the guy who's having the worst tournament at the moment is actually Fur, who's obviously the guy who came back from the injury, etc. And so you never quite know. I mean, here's the thing. It might not even be the injury. It might be the fact that he hasn't been in the lineup that long again. You have to reintegrate yourself. And then actually, Fallen's been a bit underwhelming. So here's the thing. I was
going to point out Fallen, yeah.
Luckily, it's not the end of the world. You go through the playoffs, etc. The problem for me goes like this. Is like when you look at the matchups, they're on the killer side of the bracket. They got G2 first of all, and that's no joker. I mean, we'll get into the breakdown itself, but that obviously you can't take that for lightly because we know G2's beaten them in the past. Then, even if you win, you've got what we're all calling the best team in the world, VP, in the semi-finals. So I'll say this, okay? I'll set up the context. If SK wins this tournament, this is a sick way to like reclaim the throne because this is going to be fucking hard to win this tournament, So okay, for the rest of Group B, actually, let me ask you this about SK then. If these are like events where they're having, like there's clearly flaws, ESL 1 New York, they had some issues, they're having issues here just even in terms of player performance, like do you think they're still going to bounce back from it? What's your sense at the moment?
Yes, I do think they'll bounce back from it. Just because we've seen out of SK even like that, this is why SK has been so strong. It's because they have this system they can fall back on. And this is what's made them such a strong team is when players like Cold had an off game. I mean, he's never really had an off tournament. I mean, even New York where he was underwhelming, he was still at a 1.02 rating, which is insane to think about that's kind of like his a little bit of a bad tournament for him. But the system that they play in is the real key, and that's why I think they'll bounce back because they can't just rely on that system. They've had matches and tournaments where some of the guys aren't playing as well, and they still make it deep into this tournament. They still have very, very good games, all because the system is so effective. So I think. I don't think the personal issues for that kind of a scenario are going to hinder them for too long. I think they'll snap out of it. I put a lot of faith with how weak I think Fallen's been in game. I think he's still a good enough leader and charismatic enough leader, and he very obviously has a good control of this team and kind of the beat of the team that he'll get them back on the right track. We've seen it every single time, but I will say this. I think this is the kind of scenario these past few months where they're really, really missing having Zeus. They're really missing having that coach, and especially Zeus as a coach, I think, is now we're seeing the impact of his departure. I think he would have had them on track next to Fall, and those two would have had him on track already at this point.
Yeah, and one thing I want everyone to actually watch out for is the map that this core, I mean, not much of a core, admittedly, because they did change most players since then, but the map that originally put their team on the map was Mirage, right? That was the map that they became very, very good on. That's the one that over the last couple of events, they've lost a few of those. Like that's the one where that used to be in the bag. In fact, funnily enough, that's used to be the map where when they became Luminosity and SK and became really good, they just didn't have to play that because most people were like, right, first thing you do versus them, get Mirage out the way, then you think about what else, So the key issue for me right here is that's one of the things that they had at their peak that was like the game changer. They had the sick team, the unit, they had the superstar player, they had the best AWPer, they had the best thingy player. They had all these factors, but a key detail is they had the map pool. And when the map pool's on your side, you can just make almost every game a little bit easier for yourself. So as we go into a scenario now, in the playoffs, playing G2, VP. Okay, G2 are famous for having like a weird map pool where they've got some like off-the-wall ones that they can get a win on here and there. VP, obviously, at the moment, probably has the map pool. They're right back in there. So this is what I want people to look at as SK go on. Because obviously, players can bounce back. The system, I still think, I agree with you. The system can get you quite far. Like, the system definitely, I think, could get you to VP here. It's just this. Like, start looking at that. Because if SK is going to kind of fall, if they like, if their era is over and they don't win this event, I think it starts with the map pool. I think that getting picked apart. And, like, for example, I mean, I told you, I made this comment on Twitter, that part of VP winning these last couple of matches against them over these last two tournaments is that now VP is the one who's winning out on most of the maps, you know. So that used to be what used to help SK when they played Na'Vi and VP, is that they both had super strong map pools, but SK had a slightly better one, you know. They could always get that one little edge.
Yeah, well, SK would always win like the opposing team's best map. You know, they had that deep enough pool. Now, yeah, the coin's flipped in that sense, where even SK's best map, you got to say it's dangerous, no matter who they go against, because trying to think of a map that I feel like SK at the moment can beat like anyone in the world on.
I mean,
I
would still give them probably
Overpass.
And that's the one they lost to VP in Super Overtime. I still think very good on Overpass. I think that was like a miracle match for VP. I would say Train's the one I would probably go with if I had to, you know. I always felt like Train was their secret best map, even in this, you know, the problem was in the old map pool. It was buried because like they had like 4 maps at 75% win ratio. So at that point in time, it's hard to differentiate. But here's the thing. There used to be times in that pool where, you know, they might have one extra win on another map. And I was like, I still feel like Train's the one where the killer for them is, you know, most of the super sick Train teams, Na'Vi, VP, they used to just like always win T-side. Is that SK were the only ones where it felt like they could win T-side and CT. They could do it on either, you know. They could get it against anyone, you know. That's my pick at least. Yeah,
Train's good for them. I think actually now that I actually think like super in depth about it, that Overpass match that VP won, even that I think maybe their Overpass looked weak, because the only reason they were in that match is because that was like the Miracle Fallen, where he had those like the 6-round stretch at the end of regulation, where with the AWP he was just like a god. Like where he just couldn't be stopped. He was hitting no scopes like every round. He was killing like 2 people, and you're just like, well, this isn't fair. He's something's going on. And so if he doesn't go like that, if he doesn't have that kind of a performance, I think they lose that match actually.
I mean, here's the thing.
Pretty decently.
I'll agree with you in as much as, since not many teams like Overpass, that can help you if you're still very good on it. You know, like for example, say only VP could beat them on Overpass. Well, it's still an awesome map to have in your back pocket against anyone else, right?
Yeah, but G2 is the one team during that reign of dominance for SK where Overpass was looking so strong. G2 had a couple times at tournaments where they actually beat SK on it. So and that's their quarterfinal matchup. So interesting scenario. They probably haven't had to experience in a while where they have a disadvantage in a couple different ways in the map pool.
What do you think, before we go on to the actual bracket, what do you think about Fnatic? Because obviously, I mean, New York was kind of shitty for them.
Yeah. Nothing's changed. They haven't showed me any benefit. I still, I only watched one of their match from Epicenter. I watched a bunch of the Dignitas VODs today. I don't see it. I still think they're trying to play like the old Fnatic, and they don't have. I think it's the lack of experience in guys like Lekro and. That's really hurting them. Like those 3 players alongside Olaf and Dennis, I think that's really what's hindering them, because they don't have a good read on when to make the plays that someone like Flusha or someone like JW or Crims was making, because that's the entire key of how they want to play this game. If it's going to be very individual and very loose, you have to have a very good read and a very good concept of when it's your turn to be the aggressor, when it's your turn to make something happen on the map. And I think there's a lot of opportunities that if you watch those games, you'll see Olaf making his standard plays, you'll see Dennis making a play, but on the other side of the map, away from that action, you don't see the same aggressiveness out of the other players at the right moment. You see some opportunities that get missed. And now, I mean, obviously, of course, there's that report that, I mean, I haven't heard any legs to this. I haven't heard anything myself or from any players, from any of the commentators at Epicenter, that Crims might be going back to Fnatic. So I think it's getting to the point where maybe, I mean, if that's true, then I think that's just an admission from Fnatic that they're just like, maybe this experiment isn't working too well at the moment.
Yeah. And I have to say, I watched a few of their games at this tournament. one of the big concerns I have is there was a story just before the tournament. It was an interview with Twist where he said that he will now be the in-game leader for a few events. So that in itself is weird because I even remember, right, here's the thing. Because they got Jumpy as their new coach instead of Vugo, I think initially they thought that they were going to be, using him as an in-game leader or something, but obviously that got nixed anyway. So then I remember reading a story that implied like it would be Wenton eventually. Like that was the logic behind why he was the in-game leader. Why he was in the team even, right? Yep. So then I think I heard someone else suggesting it was Dennis because obviously he used to call back in the LGB days. So it's a mess right now is the point. And here's the thing, putting it onto Twist, okay, at the moment they're getting some map wins, maybe it's okay. Like I have to say, Twist hasn't himself like fallen off in terms of fragging, so that's fine. Like I think like it's not affecting him necessarily. My big problem is I look at the team right now, and by the way, in terms of like numbers, almost nothing's changed since New York. Like the two best players are Twist and Dennis still. And by the way, remember, Twist was basically the star of the old Godsend, and Dennis was the best player at the end of Fnatic era anyway with Crimson JW. Olaf Meister is still like all right, which by the way can be okay. I keep mentioning this point. If the rest of the team was good enough, it might actually be okay for Olaf Meister to have like just average stats because his role is like playmake. So you can be a playmaker who trades basically, but in doing so, opens the rest of your team up to win the game. My big issue is, like, Lekro is just okay, He's not doing badly. For me, he's like the Spaze of their team. He's just an invisible guy, just as okay. And the problem is, the sore thumb every time is Wenton, mate. This guy, unfortunately, and if he is just a spot player, he's not good. He's not a good player. So I kind of agree with you in as much as either you got to shift the style or you got to make a roster move if it's me.
I'm not going to lie to you. When the roster between that swap between Fnatic and Godsend happened, I was very surprised to see Wenton involved. Just not because I think he's like a terrible player, or he's a bad player, but when he stood in for Fnatic, I didn't really notice anything crazy out of him. So I don't know if that was just done because they needed to have a fifth body in that spot and maybe looking at other options while they were doing it. But I didn't see what Fnatic saw to bring him in. If this was like an idea to have him as a permanent fifth, I think they would have known from when they were trying him out during Olaf's absence that he still needed a little bit more time. So maybe, I don't know if maybe they just had confidence that he would be able to pick that up on the fly and he'd be able to improve pretty quickly once he's in this lineup. But yeah, I'm not sure that's working. And Lekro I still have big question marks about him just because he's older, isn't he? He's like 24, I think. But he had like the last time I saw him play, like at any crazy, he's 23, so not too old, but
still pretty old for an up and coming player though.
Yeah, because his first breakout, I mean, at Malmo, he was insane. That was a disgusting event from him, but since then, I hadn't heard anything. Even when he was in Godsend with Twist and Pronax and all them, even before this swap happened, I still felt like he went very, very quiet in how his performance was in that lineup. So I think the one benefit, maybe not benefit, but with Twist being the in-game leader, normally I'd say stay the fuck away from that just because Twist is so talented and you need that skill level if this team is going to operate the way it needs to, the way that Olaf and Dennis want this team to play. But Fnatic's got to be the easiest team in the world to in-game lead for. Like, you have to imagine this is just the easiest team to be a fucking in-game leader. Because they expressly don't want tactics and strats. They want to be very freewheeling. They want to have a lot of freedom. So it can't be too hard, but certainly, as the star player coming into this kind of a lineup, that's a big responsibility to put on them. I just think that they don't have the same tools and the same feeling that the last Fnatic had, obviously with all that experience playing together, to make this kind of a style of play work. This is where, if you're going to bring in these new guys and you haven't really played too much together, and a lot of these guys aren't as experienced as Olaf and Dennis, you want to have some kind of a system, some kind of a structure that they can fall back on and rely on to help them improve to a certain degree.
And I do have to, by the way, in terms of the Wenton thing, like why they picked him up, I know from the interviews that I've seen, it's the classic like Fox logic, by the way, of like, this guy does whatever you say and he's a really good presence in the team and he's like, doesn't argue. And now here's the thing. Those are all great qualities if a person's also a pretty good player. Like that in that case, I'd be on board, Like if this guy just had like okay numbers, but he had all those qualities, I'd say, you know what, maybe he is some like hidden intangibles that are awesome, and maybe that makes someone else better in the team. I can buy that, okay. My problem at the moment is, like, even as much as I made that video, stats don't tell you everything, and it isn't just a numbers game, there is a reason why we tend to balance out teams, as in you need a certain amount of firepower to make up for an in-game leader who can't frag, for example. You know, there is like a certain logic to it like that. So my issue is, unless Olofmeister's going ham along with Dennis and Twist, it's hard to warrant having players who aren't in-game leaders, who aren't like super support players who play within a system, who also don't frag. That's really hard to get away with, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the entire point of this system, is so you can have more talent that can just be free, that can just, you know, be themselves. Like, if you're going to play this free, then why, yeah, there's no point in really having that of a role player. You kind of want to have 5 badasses who know how to play the game on an individual and kind of a team-wide level. So, yeah, certainly if he's not performing in this system, then I mean, you just kind of see what you're going to get. Yeah, he's had a really bad run of matches. A lot of red there in that HLTV page.
And that's one thing that worries me about that rumor, right? It is just a rumor at the moment. Like, for example, usually when some extremes like that's going to happen, it gets out a bit more to people like us behind the scenes. So even if we were, like, for example, if it was legit going to happen, we might not even talk about it on the show. So that actually means that it really is just a community room we're addressing right now. So I will say this. The thing that would concern me about that is, I have to say, Moses, for me, it's obvious. I would personally replace Wencher and give it a go, like you're saying. Just put all the skill play. Problem I have is, if that really is the storyline, like they really love his personality and the way he plays. I mean, Lekro's the guy who has no real history except with Twist, and even then he's only played. So I'm worried that if it happened, they remove Lekro, which to me is just like, that's a wash, you know. Like, I don't see what the gain is there, except if Crims somehow magically goes back to being really good because he's with Olaf. That's about it, you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even if this swap is true and it happens after Epicenter, like Crims hasn't been playing that great.
Yeah,
Crims hasn't been anything spectacular. So it's, you know, I'll flip a coin if that's going to be an improvement, if he'll be able to turn around once he gets back with Dennis and Olaf. That would be cool, though. I mean, we chatted about it. It would be basically the old LGB.
But here's a problem.
4 and 5.
Here's a problem, though.
What's the problem, Duncan?
What people haven't really thought about is, if you think you've seen drama, so you remember when Nip, Fnatic wouldn't shake their hands, and then you remember when you know, people thought that flusha was cheating, and you remember when there was the Olaf. If you think that's drama, if Crims goes to this team, now Fnatic, well, that's the problem right there, Moses. In theory, Fnatic should get the major spot, but they're already qualified for the minor from an invitation.
Yeah.
So what the fuck happens there? Because, by the way, if they swap it so Fnatic's in the major and Godsent has to go to the minor, out of nowhere, last minute, I'm telling you right now, the fucking world will melt down on the internet and all the players will unleash the salt across the waves and we will all get drowned to death.
Not to mention, by the way, that the European minor is in 2 weeks. So if this is going to happen, it better happen fucking quick so teams even know where they're going.
And I'd even go out and say, by the way, even though in theory that might, for all I know, maybe that's fine for the rules, I actually think that's an example of where, if that's the case, Valve should have a rule. Like, you have to declare, you know, a month before the major that you're going to use one of your spots for this team. Because otherwise, imagine this. Luckily, I made this point, by the way, before, but I made it about teams and orgs. But imagine this scenario, okay? Imagine that Fnatic was going to the minor, right? And they're a day away from going to the minor. And then they're talking to, you know, let's say Crims. It could be flusha, it could be JW, it can be any of the three, right? And they just say to one of them, you know what? Godsent's kind of shit right now. Why are you even wasting your time with him? Come play with us. And so a day before the minor, suddenly Fnatic gets the major spot back. Godsent's fucked because they can't travel there. You know, that could happen. That's literally allowed to happen in this system. And that's a flaw. Like, you got to think ahead and plan. You got to have policies in place to prevent people literally like playing God with the spot in that sense, you know, because that's not like a reasonable way to do it.
Well, we all know some of these policies that have been put in place by the company haven't been well thought out.
Why did you say the company there? Like they're actually like fucking ironically from Half-Life. They're like the fucking G-man out of like.
Yeah, I want them to start becoming this like idea, like this shadowy figure in the background. Okay. That's what I want to be paint this image as. Okay. But I have a situation for you. Let's say you are the GM or the owner of Fnatic.
Okay.
And you're thinking about hitting up Crims tomorrow. What the fuck are you offering him to come over to get that major spot? Because this isn't just like a player edition. This is like, hey, if you come here, we are automatically in the major. So what are you just throwing the checkbook at him, giving him a fucking penthouse suite for like the next 6 months and like Stockholm or some shit? Like what are you offering?
You like booty? Not gay. Okay, just asking. Just checking what's on the menu here. Okay. Like drugs? Wrong Godsent player. What do you mean? Don't know. Just leaked there. No, just jokes, obviously. Just all jokes, obviously.
Still all
mates, yeah. So, okay. And scene. So, no. Here's the question though going forwards then. So we've done the groups, now we have to look at the brackets.
Yep.
So luckily, I mean, there's time between these. So we know the first round of the group, which is the round of 6. So we'll start actually, since we were in Group B with SK as it is. SK plays G2. And obviously, we have seen 2 fantastic series between them this year. Well, I say fantastic in terms of the results. So there was the EPL final, which was amazing. That legitimately was one of the great matches. You know, full 5-game series. Even the 5th game, Inferno, was this epic overtime. Then obviously
the last time we've seen Inferno, by the way, the going away present.
Then we had the ECS final, which actually wasn't a fantastic game. It was just a shock because SK was the best team. I mean, they were LG at the time, and amazingly, G2 like kind of stomped them a bit. Actually, like they kind of just rolled them. And then obviously they played in the minor in the group there on Cobble, and that was like a 16-12 to SK on Cobble. So that was a decent enough game, but amazingly, that means that actually with the body lineup of G2 is one of the only teams that actually has a winning record against SK in maps.
Yeah, and like during the era of SK's dominance throughout most of this year, that's G2 has always kind of been their weird kryptonite, and we mentioned. I mean, it comes down to like sometimes that overpass. I think G2's train has been like particular, like sneakily good at times, a little bit more reliant on shocks and screen, but. Those are 2 maps that SK has pretty much consistently had in their wheelhouse all year that G2 was able to be competitive on, here and there in this series. So, I don't expect this to actually be that great of a series in terms of like.
That makes it sound like you think SK is going to win.
I honestly don't know who's going to win. This is why I don't think it's going to be that great of a series because both of these teams, SK has not been playing like a very good SK, very, very fundamentally weak, which has always been one of their strong points. And G2, we know, is just going to be naturally streaky because they have such a huge reliance on Scream and Shocks. So I think, this could go 3 maps. They could be 3 close maps. But in terms of like actual Counter-Strike, I think this actually could be ugly. And if group stages is any indication, we'll get just like a 16-7, 16 and then like 5-16, and then maybe a close third map. I mean, I think I would lean towards SK on this. I don't have confidence, and it's not necessarily confidence in G2. It's that playstyle. I didn't even like it, when Envy was really dominant and they won Cluj, and heading into that and the Cologne major that they got second at. That playstyle that I feel like G2 has some of those elements in it. I don't like that like momentum skill based play style. I don't have a lot of confidence in it, so I can't really predict G2 to win just because the nature of that system is going to give you inconsistent results. They're going to have bad games just by nature of how the team is made up.
Yeah, plus I'd also say the key detail, like kind of what you were referring to, but another way to say it is that you can't rely on which G2 turns up. Whereas actually, even an SK that has like player problems, you have a sense of what map they'll be strong on and how they'll play roughly. So I think in terms of performance, I'm with you on that one. Like I think this can be 3 maps though, personally. Because one of the big problems I see for G2, right, is that G2 were already a team who banned Mirage all the time. And as I just referenced right now, amazingly, for once in history, you might want to play Mirage if you can against SK, but actually G2 can't. So basically, G2's ban's almost certainly going to be Mirage anyway. Now, interestingly enough, the ban, obviously, from the guys from SK is Cash, which is a strong map for G2, so there's a strong map for G2 out. So at the moment, it looks to me like I expect G2 to go with the classic Dust 2 pick, right? Yep. And we know SK can play it, but admittedly, they were only good on it at like their peak, So, okay, let's say I can give G2 that map. Now, I think if you're SK, you're probably just going with like Train or something here again. Again, I think like that's probably the best option. So I think if we could get to a third map, the problem is when you think of what's out there as a third map, I mean, Cobble's always been reasonably iffy for the guys from G2. Like sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. I think SK's a little bit better on that. Nuke, I don't think is good for anyone really. Like they neither really play it that much. Overpass, like sure, in the past we've agreed, like yeah, that was the one that bizarrely G2 won twice against Luminosity, but at the moment I'd give Luminosity the Overpass, well they're now SK, you know what I mean? Like so as a result, I think if it goes to a third, I'm giving it to SK for this one. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I will too, because I think they win on. I would think out of those 3 maps that'll be left, the Cobble, the Nuke, and the Overpass. I think it's going to be Nuke or Overpass, and both of those maps I give the edge to SK certainly. Have we even seen G2 play Nuke?
Yeah, they played it against Liquid actually at ECS and they won. Okay, but they just won like CT style basically.
Yeah, I think both of those maps that go through are both going to go towards SK. Because I would imagine that SK would know that they have a strength in those 2 maps and just take away Cobble, even if they feel like they're strong on it. Why even leave a map in that G2 could have some success on? And then it comes into play Just the ability, is Shocks and Scream going to go off? I mean, that's what it's going to come down to, basically. So yeah, I'm going to take SK with that series.
Yeah, because I mean, the key thing for me there is, like, it's hard to see a world in which G2 can win 2-0. Like, for example, okay, sometimes they get wins on Train. It's not really that reliable. Whereas the difference is, if I had to pick someone as 2-0, I don't think it's impossible that the SK guys can turn up on Dust 2 and win that. I've always said this. It's a classic. There's another reason, Moses, probably, as to why G2 is so erratic. It's a classic. Here's another one of my principles. I'll have to make like an article, like Thorin's principles of Counter-Strike, because a classic principle that has held true for a long time is that being amazing on Dust 2 is not that great, because even though you will still win quite a lot, let's say you can get like a 70% win rate. The difference is it's extremely rare anyone gets like, like the kind of win rate you could have on a Train, or you could have like 80% on that if you're a god. The problem is, because it's an upset map and it's a skill map, even if you're amazing on it, you're going to lose some of them.
Yeah, you're going to get beat at times.
You're going to get more upset more than the other teams are. Like, for example, an Overpass Specialist is very rarely going to get upset, if you think about it.
I mean, the mad thing about this series is, as much as we say that all this, like, this is why I G2, you break my heart. But I mean, this is all like obsolete. If Shocks is in one of those moods, if like Shocks has his games, like that's it. This is the thing where he could just come out and be nuts. He could have his series where he just wins them the series 2-0. Him and Scream just come out and just headshot everyone and destroy everyone. And just like get the momentum early on in a map by like resetting an economy on like a 4th or 5th round. And then it could just be downhill. So it is still a very scary matchup. But SK's going to take it.
And by the way, if somehow G2 actually wins this series, I think it's time for people to actually study what G2 does against SK, because this will be like 2 series they'll have won, and then a third one, like that famous best of 5 where they could have won. Like there'll be something to it where they're not just winning just because of headshotting everyone. There must be something about the style. Okay, so the other quarterfinal, I mean, I call it, it's a round of 6, the same shit basically, because it's basically like quarterfinal, but you got to buy for 2 years. So okay, Fnatic versus Team Dignitas, right? First things first, who do you think is going to win?
Dignitas.
Okay. I also have Dignitas. So what are your reasons why?
Just the way they play. I talked about it in the group stage. Just the way they have their structure. I think Cajun B's playing phenomenally right now. Obviously, Magus Boy and Config are good, but the real key to it with those two players is how they're currently playing off the other two teammates, MSL and Rubino. And then I think what we just talked about, Fnatic, the lack of an in-game leader, because I think this we're now starting to see like some really, really big impacts of teams that were gearing up and were deep into the commitment of a coach being an in-game leader or not having a strong in-game leader in-game to get more fragging power. We're starting to see a lot of these teams really struggle, and I think Dignitas is one of the teams that, despite everything, despite like probably should have having to cut him earlier, MSO was still in that team for so long, despite not being able to put up any numbers, and now he's like at a premium. Like, this is like a perfect situation for him where now he's got great tools. They have an in-game leader that they didn't dedicate to going in a different direction and trying to grab more talent. And I think that kind of structure, that kind of system is going to be able to outlast Fnatic, because I think they'll just get picked apart. The one cool thing I saw about Dignitas when I was watching some of their VODs today is they're very similar to like to the other Danish, to Astralis, when Astralis was better, when Astralis was like one of the top 3 teams. They don't do anything like, they're just very good with fundamentals in terms of when they're taking their fights, how they're positioning themselves on the map and in bomb sites during hits and during executions to allow their teammates to have good crossfires, to have good teamwork. But the one key difference to them is when they have a lead and it's getting later on in matches, they do understand how to just like, put their foot on the throats of their opponent and just kind of finish the match. They know, like, they're willing to get aggressive. They know how to close these out. And I think that's what their biggest strength right now is the fact that they do close these matches out.
Because, I mean, my big concern in this series is I actually think Dig's going to win, like I say that himself. I do think, though, that if you look at the matchup, I don't think it's actually impossible for Fnatic to get a map. Mm-hmm. Like, at the moment, interestingly enough, I think actually Mirage is going to be a key in this series, because I noticed like Fnatic's won a couple of Mirages. That's like not a bad map for them. Whereas interestingly, Dignitas, I mean, like I said, they have a pretty deep map pool, but that's a map that they're basically willing to play against everyone. They've let everyone like have it. They don't ban it. The main bans basically given the option, Dignitas bans Train and Cash at the moment. Now, Cash, in theory, you might ban against Fnatic, so I think that might happen. Train's not really a threat, so I think that would be like second rotation anyway. So in this world, I think Mirage can, if Fnatic want it, they can have it, basically. And the key thing about Mirage is, Dignitas is good on it. They've got some wins, but they're not like amazing. And I've seen them get spanked a couple of times where they just never got any T rounds. So I think if they have a good CT performance on Mirage, I think Fnatic could win Mirage. Problem is, I literally think the other two maps, it's hard to see how Fnatic's going to win. Because the other two maps, like, let's think what they could be. I mean, we know immediately that Fnatic historically bans Nuke. So if they go with the nuke ban again, then we're in a world
they
where...
They kind of have to against Dignitas.
Probably do. I mean, I think unless you can play it, you have to ban it, because I think Dig will just straight up pick it. So let's imagine you ban nuke. Now you're in a world where Dignitas, I mean, there's a lot they can go with here. They can go with Overpass, they can go with Dust 2. They can try and, again, they can exploit the map pool and try and pick something they think you're not good on. Maybe they don't think you're good on Overpass or something, they pick that, or they don't think you're good on Train. So I actually think that the key for me with Dignitas here is, first of all, they have a chance on Mirage, certainly. It's not like I'm just giving that to Fnatic.
They did just be Navi on it.
I think they have a chance on every map. So I think Fnatic could win Mirage, but I think Dig's going to win the other two. So I have that going 2-1 to Dig.
Yeah, that's the safe bet. I would actually, I wouldn't mind. I'll just say 2-0 for Dig. I think they're looking much stronger at the moment. There is always that X factor because you have Olaf Meister, you have Dennis, like that Fnatic. They could just go nuts, Twist as well in there. But I think Dignitas at the moment, the structure that MSL set up with this team, I think they're in a really good place. And I can't think of a map that, you know, even look what you were saying with Fnatic and Mirage, they could win it, but what like you don't feel confident saying Fnatic's going to win a map against Dignitas. I don't even really know a home map for Fnatic, even like Cobble, which is usually
come to think of it, that's the part that doesn't make sense about what I said. It's like that's the one they could win if they had a good CT, but why would I predict them to win it? That doesn't actually make that sense. I should just pick Dig 2-0, right? Like they could,
Good balls out, Duncan. Let's do it.
Nah, I'm going to go 2-0 Dignitas, yeah. Okay, and also the other factor to add for Dignitas, right? Okay, map pool's good, and like I said, the downside is they don't have like the one super like they don't have that one map that'll win against anyone. But I will say this: one thing that has really impressed me, like here's the thing: as each tournament went on with Dignitas, I was like, this is getting pretty good. Well, it's pretty consistent.
This is nice.
And then the thing I really am shocked at is how stable that like 3-man core is. Like Magic's boy now is like a legit star. Like he's going to be like one of the best players in the world. Config's like getting pretty good. Like he was very up and down early in the year. And then Cajun doesn't even have to be the superstar. He can just be like the good. Basically, he's like Cajun Astralis. He can be like the third best player, have the odd really big game, and that you've already got like some sick firepower there. So I actually think for Fnatic, who's trying to be a firepower team, they're gonna have their hands full in that sense. Because the difference is, I know those Dignitas guys are turning up.
It's really cool how those players have turned around over the course of this year. Because I remember casting them at Barcelona in February, and the big story was, you know, Config was on the team at the time. Yeah. It was that, you know, he wasn't going to be able to ever be a LAN player. He just couldn't perform. Yep. He was really good online, but his LAN performances were just trash.
That was the team that was just carried by Kirby, if you remember.
Yep. That was when like Cobble really showed up as like one of their strongest maps, and Kirby was like the dominant force on that. That was the one where they were actually able to challenge Fnatic at that event, Envy at that event. I think they beat Envy on Cobble, but they definitely took Fnatic like 14-16. Back when Fnatic was like beating most people on that map. They had some absurd win rate on it. So, yeah, I mean, that was the start, and it's really cool to see how far Config has come since then and being able to put up these performances. So, Dignitas is like, that's why I watched their VODs today, because that's the one team that I'm just like, holy shit, these guys have been really good recently, and I don't really know why. So, I mean, it's been... they very sneakily got very good pretty quickly ever since the end of last E-League season.
And if people want a little, again, another little pattern that I've picked up on that might just end up being nothing, but something to keep in mind when you watch the game, is that I've also noticed a really good sign for Dignitas is I was looking at all the wins they've had with this lineup, and it's very rare that any opponent star player just goes super ham on them, right? Like, because they have here's the key detail as well, this is my theory, because they have this quite spread out but pretty good firepower themselves, I think that in itself is one of the things that is always a good neutralizer to a superstar player. Because the idea is, it's not like the superstar just kills your superstar and then runs rampant over you. He kills your superstar and now he's fighting other people who are also... It makes it harder for one man to beat you. So that's what I like about their system. They've got the map pool, they've got good firepower, and in general, they're not going to get beaten by one guy. Like, the difference is, if you put G2 against Dignitas... that's where I think it's hard for a G2 to win, you know, because they need that superstar to go super ham. So the problem for Fnatic I see is it's not even going to be like a Dennis or Olaf Meister goes ham and that just gets them the series. It's going to be a lot more than that. Okay, so obviously by the time the next show comes out, the rest of the matches will be played. So we have to sort of hypothetically do it now. So we won't go like super balls deep, because obviously some of them might end up not happening, but we'll give like our vague thoughts, okay? So at the moment, we both have the same semi-finals. We have SKVP, which is a classic matchup, and then we have Dignitas Na'Vi, which is obviously a very weird matchup, because we haven't seen that with these particular teams going forward. So let's start with the classic, the SKVP, which for this year has been one of the best matchups of the year. So what do you think happens this time?
I think Virtus.pro is going to win it again, unless I see something crazy in this SK-G2 matchup that makes me think that SK is like on an upward trajectory, because right now it just feels like they're kind of in limbo. I think Virtus.pro is just too good at the moment, and especially if Fallen is having a really rough event and that doesn't turn around. And also, Fur having a relatively quiet event. I don't see enough firepower in this SK team. Virtus.pro's gotten to the point again where much like you just said with Dignitas, one player isn't going to beat Virtus.pro. One thing that does scare me about VP is, in this matchup specifically, is their train. I don't know if it's against SK specifically that they have adjusted something, but they've changed something on train recently where you don't see that like trademark explosive execution at the outer bomb site that Virtus.pro has loved through every version of train, all through whenever they were in a slump. Train was still a good map for them. The last time I saw their T set on train, it was very much like who is this Virtus.pro team? And I think that would be a key in the map pool, because actually I think Virtus.pro, they lost it against SK, I want to say, during Swiss format or something against SK.
Yeah, that was in Swiss format. That's the last time.
And then when it came down to the actual BO3 series, they banned it against SK. So like Virtus.pro being afraid to play SK on that map, I think is a big key. But I'm still going to take them. I still think every other map that's going to be in there, I think VP would have an advantage. And like I said, even that overpass match where they lost at New York, that only happens because Fallen goes absolutely bonkers with the AWP.
So the interesting thing for me in this series is, like, first of all, the form is obvious. The form, you have to give it to VP. They've won the last like 2 series essentially they've played, and SK is looking shaky. So form's the obvious one, but then when we get into maps, there's actually a lot has changed in the last like month and a half from the old scenario. So the old scenario, like I described before, SK had the slight advantage in the map pool, and it was more like, if you're VP, first of all, you're going to have to sort of slightly steal a map. You're going to play, in the past, they could always in theory play 3 maps that they all like, right? Problem is, you knew that because SK was slightly favoured, you're going to have to first of all steal a map, and then it really, for VP, your only choice is what order do you play the 3 in. Now that is what has changed, because okay, traditionally, think of the bans, they actually match up for both teams. It's SK ban Cash, VP ban does too. The problem here is that, as we saw at New York, suddenly VP have the pocket nuke. That's what's changed about it. So VP's got nuke in their pocket, and you have to feel like I'm telling you right now, from the way SK is playing, that has to be the second rotation ban unless VP picks nuke.
Yeah, we saw. We did see Virtus.pro with those new executions, those new smoke setups at that upper bomb site that seemed very, very difficult. So yeah, their nuke is now they're one of the teams. I think right behind Dignitas, I would say Virtus.pro is probably the second best nuke team we have right now. But I don't know. I don't know if SK shies away from nuke.
Well, when they played the first time, they banned it second rotation.
Okay. So yeah,
they both did the classic bans, Dust 2 Cash,
yep.
And then. Yeah, but that was. Remember, it was the nuke in New York that killed them as the third one. So that's my question: is if the fear is there, maybe it isn't. Yeah. Maybe they're bold enough. They say we practiced it, we're back.
Are they so bold? I don't know. I hope not. I hope this goes standard. That was the one disappointment of that series in New York, was that nuke was the third map, because that could have been such a epic third map if it was something different. I would like for them to give us what we all want and just do like the standard, have like a Mirage overpass and like a Cobble or something as the third map, or like a that would be my ideal series for these two. But yeah, I still just flat out by form, just not necessarily even because Virtus.pro is so strong right now, which they are. It's just because SK just feels very weak as well. And those fundamental mistakes that they make, Virtus.pro is going to eat those alive. Snacks, I think, is now starting to creep back into that conversation of one of the best players in the world. I think he's gotten back to that level. He's been unreal lately. So there's a lot of reasons why Virtus.pro could just dominate this series 2-0. Actually, that wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Like, the big concern I have is just the whole issue of what happens with nuke. Like I say, I want to know if it gets banned. Because here's the thing. as much as I think that VP are the ones who have it at the moment, if I had to pick between the two, I don't think that they're going to pick it though. Like, I think that's something where they make you ban it as your second rotation, and then they get the advantage in the pick ban, Yeah. So I think that I don't think they're going to pick it first, because the problem is I still think it's too risky to do that, Like, if you fuck up, then you know that the second map's going to be one that they like, even though you'll like it as well. Like, I think it's too risky. So personally, I think you get the standard first round, Cash does too, they're out of there. Now, in terms of SK, right now, it feels like for SK, you probably have to try and do something like the overpass pick, or you probably have to pick like one of your old classics. I mean, Train maybe, because like you're saying, VP have themselves shied a little bit away.
That's the other wild card in that veto process. If his VP just decides to ban it first round, that would be nuts.
Here's the thing: they could, in theory, because the difference is, I don't think SK is going to pick those two. That's the key for me. So if VP wants a ban advantage, consider that. The thing is that's still a bit wacky. I mean, when you consider in theory the map pool's shifted to you, it's a bit wacky to try like a wild card like that. You could do it obviously, and also remember the other team probably won't expect that, so they might just also not pick it because they didn't plan to pick it anyway. They've come in with a game plan.
Well, and also remember that baller fucking interview that Pasha did. That he was just like, "Yeah, we broke them. We knew as soon as we beat them once, like." It's basically snowballed. Like, we've broken them mentally in this matchup. We'll be able to handle them from now on because we've already beaten them and they don't know how to handle it. And then the next day, like I think it was the very next day, Fallen gives the interview about the internal struggles. So made Pasha look like a genius there, but that was just a sick interview. That was one of those really, really good ones where it's like no political correct bullshit that these players are all like, yeah, they're a very good team and blah, blah, blah. They'll bounce back. It was just straight up, yeah. We broke them, and we're going to dominate from now on in this matchup. So that was really cool to see that kind of swagger and that confidence back in this VP lineup.
Because, I mean, I actually do think, like I say, for SK, it's going to be like Overpass or Train. I would suspect Train, like for the same reason. Like, I still think Train's their best. Like, if I had to pick the map, you're going to, like, do or die for your pick. I'm going to take Train just because I think classically, and I agree, by the way, VP actually isn't as godlike on T-side as they used to be. They used to be so scary,
I don't know if that's like a product of, because Neo's been the in-game leader now since this resurgence. I don't know maybe if it's his style of in-game leading where he's changed this, but like I just didn't see that explosive style out of VP that made them so difficult. And it feels like just they've gone away naturally, like by their own choice. They've gone away from one of their biggest strengths on that map, so that's a little bit worrying. But I mean, let's say VP does ban Train. What do you like? Who do you think wins D2? Because like you said, SK is not world beaters on it anymore. That was like their peak, and VP has never really been good on Dusty. That used to be their permaban.
No, but that's the interesting thing, because remember the one time D2 was let through was that NIP series in the round of 8 of A-League, and obviously that, like, admittedly, that was a very, very weird game that I don't think would happen again for either team. But that's why it's got to be a question mark, even if you're SK, because I think that's too random in that sense, like it's too scary. Like, I think in general, if you're a really good team, I think you usually go with comfort and you go, I win with execution. So for me personally, I expect it to be like, I think VP is going to pick Mirage. They did that in the group stage here. They won it. The one that they lost in New York was the OT one, where they were actually doing very well in it. I think they're very comfortable in Mirage. I think they can pick that and know that at the moment, it's possibly a slightly weaker map now for SK. Then you go in, I think SK, you go with Train. By the way, I'm loving the series already if it's like that. The real question then comes for the third map, because I feel like with what's going to be left, I feel like with Nuke being scary, with there being a scenario where, I mean, if you're the guy, I think the third map, it's going to be like Cobble or Overpass. So I would like it personally if it was Cobble. I still think that would make for the fire third map, And basically, by the way, that's the 3 maps from Cologne that we could have had, but in a different order. We never did get them because obviously Nuke came instead of the fucking Train. But I think that would be a great series. And I'm also picking VP to win that, because I think at the moment they're the only team of the two that I can look at all 3 maps and say you could win all 3 if it's those.
And I will say though, I think this matchup in particular is so good that even with SK and some kind of a little bit of a funk right now, I don't think this is a 2-0 for either team. I think this is going to be a 3-mapper no matter what.
Here's the thing, Moses. I actually think right now you can apply the old VP logic on the other side of the equation. So I think even if SK right now in form isn't as good, let's say they're not going to win this. Let's say they lost the final to Navi or something crazy, right? Yeah. The difference is, I think much like old VP, who sometimes weren't in like championship form, I think they're going to rise to the moment and it'll be like the classic. Because you know that there's certain matchups where that happens. Like, I mean, the the old one used to be like the Danes of Australis when they were TSM versus VP. Certain teams, when they play, it's like their form doesn't matter. They always match up the same way. And somehow they get their way into the series. And crucially, in most of these series I'm talking about, because you have a chance on every map, there's no killer map, it just kills you dead. You have time to warm up as well. You get going, you get the rhythm of that team. You do something, they adapt, we adapt. So I think in that sense, forget what's happened so far to SK in the last 2 tournaments. I think they're going to come back and it's going to be another great series,
Yep, I certainly hope so, because this is what the VP is the only team to take maps off SK at majors all year, at both majors. VP is the only team to get 1 map on SK. So yeah, this has been it's kind of sick that SK's had so many. What the hell is it about SK that they've had like every good rivalry? SK G2, SK VP right now. Navi SK was like the rivalry of the first half of the year. Yeah. So, or Luminosity, Navi at the time. So,
and let's not forget, the only matchup that didn't work for Luminosity was Fnatic, and then Fnatic just literally like
imploded.
One day, Olaf's wrist was like, and they were like, "What was that sound, guys?" Like, that moment. Here's what must have happened to Olaf in that moment. The moment in the zombie movie where the guy's just being bit, and then someone's like, "Be careful, don't let them bite you." It transfers by like skin or something. And the person always like there's always like a really bad camera shot where they get their sleeve and they just pull it down over the cut because they know like they're definitely gonna die. But while you still feel like a human, you don't want to just give it up and let him cap you, right? So that must have been what Olaf must have felt like in that moment when he's like, "Are you okay? Yep. I mean, you can play the major, right? Yep, certainly. Yep, I'll be fine." And he's like, "Oh God, the time's ticking." Like, that's basically what happened. And so as a result, their only bad matchup took care of itself.
Yeah, I mean we talked about that in the last one too. A lot of SK's dominance was just because teams like Guardian had the injury, Olaf had the injury, and they just faded away. Yeah, and Fnatic's still starting to get back there. Olaf's still starting to get back there. So, yeah, that's all Gucci for SK. But I think Virtus.pro takes this one. I think they're going to get knocked out here in the semis.
Okay, so then here's the real question, Moz. This is where you're going to get your metal-tested motherfucker. So, when Dignitas plays Na'Vi, now here is a really, really spicy match. Because first of all, we haven't seen a best of 3 like this between these 2 teams.
Yeah.
So what do you think happens? Who wins?
That's tough. I think I take Na'Vi on this one. I think I go with the safer pick and say Na'Vi, despite the fact that I am not super convinced by this team just yet. I think Simple's having way too good of an event and way too good of a run, and he's on fire right now as an individual. And just the mere fact of that, while it might not win them maps, certainly against Dignitas it probably isn't going to win them. Like maybe win them 1 map of the series. It won't let them win the series, but that individual skill level will keep them in games, and that will buy time for someone like Guardian to go through a struggling period. Someone like Edward or C's to wake up. C's might not. He's still struggling with this in-game leader transition, but Flamey as well. And they do have that trio that's just so dangerous because at any point those 3 guys can just win a map single-handedly for their team. So I'm still going to take Na'Vi on this one, but I think this is just a scary matchup. I think Na'Vi still has this question mark of which map they're going to go with in terms of Nuke, Cash, or Cobble. They've got to play one of those and fix one of them, but that's the worrying part. But I think just the skill level of Simple too much is going to keep them in these games. Even if Dignitas is playing better as a team, I think Simple can do enough to allow Guardian to take over from there.
Yeah, my problem with this series is there are a lot of positives for Dignitas. I mean, like I say, at the moment with how stable they are, with how much good firepower reliably, and with the map pool, basically, this will sound strange, but there's no, on paper, bad matchup for Dignitas in the world right now. At the moment, one of the few teams that, in theory, can always have a chance against everyone, right? Because they have the cores of reliability. My problem is, first of all, if I look just on paper, then I should immediately say, right, great. So we're a Nuke team. We know they've only just started playing it and letting it through sometimes because they're scared of Cobblestone, obviously. So in this world, we want to get Nuke against them. But actually, that's the map that Na'Vi beat them on in the group stage. So what's bizarre is, if you pick Nuke, you actually lost your last one against Na'Vi, so you might be a little bit scared of that. Even so, personally, I would have to say you've got to rely on what you think your strengths are, and you've got to go for it again, because actually Na'Vi lost a Nuke later to Nip. So I think you have to think in your own mind it was a one-off. But on the other side of the equation, so I've told you already, Mirage can be a dangerous map for the guys from Dignitas. But that was actually, in my opinion, the best map of Na'Vi coming in the tournament. And actually, that's the map that the Dignitas guys won. So bizarrely, you could have, those could be the first 2 maps of the tournament. Those could be Nuke, Mirage, just like we had in the group here as map 1 and 2. And the key thing is, those could go either way. But unfortunately, that creates like instability, you know, like no one can really be sure which one they're going to win. Now, if it comes to a decider, there's so many ways this can go, because the problem is if it gets the second ban rotation, I think, like, for example, you're going to get like Cobble's not going to be in there, so you're not going to worry about for your Na'Vi. I mean, funnily enough, Dignitas don't really play Cash. So I feel like the interesting question for me for Dig is they've been banning Train and Cash. If I were them, knowing that Na'Vi definitely doesn't play Cash, you shouldn't ban Cash. You should ban Train, because you know that'll be Na'Vi's pick, you know. Yeah. So that's a concern for
absolutely.
you.
But I mean, still, that's the scary part. I could see I can envision this series being one where Dignitas wins the first map, like almost no matter what it is or whatever their map pick is, because there's still a lot of weakness on the Na'Vi side. Even though they did win Nuke, I don't think anyone has a whole lot of confidence in them being able to beat them twice on it. So, I mean, Na'Vi's going to ban Cash, Dignitas bans Train, let's say. And then every other map, pretty much, like, Dignitas can just go straight to Cobble and be like, fuck you, you guys suck on this map, we're just going to win. And that would be just basically a free first map. For the Dignitas guys. Cobble hasn't been won by Na'Vi since Simple joined the lineup.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, it was all the way back in E-League Season 1. They won it against Cloud9. But yeah, this is a situation where I think Dignitas is just going to have their pick on the first map and just be like, which map would we like to win and where would we like to go? Because I think Cobble, Nuke, I would still lean toward Dignitas on that one. It's after that where things start to get a little bit dicey. I don't think anyone wants to fuck with Na'Vi on Overpass right now, especially after that NIP win. Even with Dignitas winning Mirage, I think that's still think that's a little bit sketchy. I wouldn't want to play Na'Vi on that too many times and play the odds on that map. So I think Dignitas has got to go with Cobble as their pick. Na'Vi probably goes with Overpass.
Yeah, because the concern for me here is that, unfortunately, I feel like Na'Vi's gotten fucked a little bit by winning the Nuke in the group, because that makes it more likely if you're picking between your Train and Nuke and you guys from Dig. Now, if this was the first time you played him in the tournament, you probably do go Nuke. You go, fuck it, if you don't ban Nuke, I'm going to take it. But if you just lost Nuke to them, now you go, well, you know what, maybe let's just go with that Cobble that we know everyone's beating them on anyway, and we're decent on, so let's take that. So I agree, I think Cobble can be very good for Dig, and so I actually think that, here's what's weird, I'll give Dig Cobble, I'll say if they pick that, if it goes like I'm saying, and they can get it, I think they can win that map. I also think they could also win Nuke, by the way, I think that's also a doable map. So I can give Dig that map. My problem is, on all the other maps, Dig isn't godlike enough on them, and Na'Vi definitely can play Overpass, Mirage, Dust 2, like they can play these maps. So my big issue in that point in time is that when you add in that, as much as I'm saying there's that reliable core of good players on Dig, I mean the superstar advantage goes over to Na'Vi. I mean Simple right now is fucking bonkers, the numbers this guy's putting up, and he's only played, by the way, at these last two LANs top teams. He's had the super tough group, and then obviously only played the good teams at New York. So right now his numbers, star factor is always a fact. Like, people never used to understand this, right? One of the ways I used to predict games in the past was I would go, right, who do I think the better team is? Who has the map advantage? And then the third factor was always who has the best player. Because if you have like 2 out of the 3, you've got a pretty good chance of winning. So I have to say at the moment, even though I think Dignitas can win map 1, assuming they pick first, you know, I think Na'Vi's going to take the series. So I think it's like, okay, Dig, you did well, you're moving up the ladder, but it stops here, unfortunately. You don't get the miracle fairy tale.
Do you think Na'Vi falls into that trap of, since they won Nuke, do you think there's any chance they pick that as their map?
I don't think so, because here's the thing. Surely
that would be such a fucking blunder, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that. And also, here's the thing. I think they're willing to play it. That's the difference, because they want to get Cobble out of the way. They want to get that out of their face. But I don't think that they have the balls to actually pick it, though. Like, especially because look at their team. They really do look like a team that needs to be comfortable on the map, you know. That's why I think they're getting banged on Cobble. Like, obviously, think about the mad skills they have. You'd think they'd have had at least one game where they just went ham and killed everyone. That even hasn't happened on Cobble. Because I think that the lack of confidence with so many, like, young star player type guys just fucks with their mind. So, for me, I think Na'Vi takes it because, I mean, first of all, form and having Simple, there's a pretty good reasons in himself, right?
Yeah, right. Having Simple is a big factor at the moment. Yeah, because I think even if they lose Cobble, if whatever their pick is, whether it's Dust 2, Overpass, I think they win those 2 maps. So it'll be interesting. But I think Dignitas will take the first map in this, or they'll take Cobble. Because that's the map I think that Dignitas has to pick in this series. So I think that's the map they'll win, and then from there it's just going to be all Na'Vi.
So here's what Sexy Mose is. We've predicted a rematch of the ESL Yacht, but this won't be taking place at midnight. This will be taking place, checks online hurriedly, in 2 days, 11 hours. So who will win the rematch? VP versus Na'Vi. Who does Moses pick?
VP.
See, I'm picking VP as well. This sucks actually because so far we haven't had a single prediction I went against. So, and by the way, we didn't discuss these actual matchups off air. Like we don't.
It don't seem silly.
I know it seems bullshit, doesn't it? I mean, ironically, by the way, I'll just give you another point just for general, like bit of behind the scenes info. You know that same thing often happens on the analysis desk. Me and Yanko only tend to like quibble over like the the small ones that have like a weird factor. People probably think we discuss that backstage. We don't actually. Like we'll talk about general data, but we never talk about our picks. Not least because I think for most of us, I only usually do my pick in the moment. I try to put the analysis together and on the spot come up with what I think's good. Because also, by the way, I literally want it to allow it. So if someone made a great pot on the desk, I can factor that in as well.
I think the only time that we ever actually have any kind of picks discussed before the desk segments are when we do those bets at the beginning of the day.
Yeah, true.
When we just everyone writes down their picks, but by that you don't even know the map pool at that point, so it's a little bit.
Those are actually worse. Like I sometimes I've gone against my own pick if it turned out the map veto was different. So, what's your reason for picking VP to win?
I think the map pool is going to be the biggest reason for me. I think it's just, there's too many weaknesses on the Navi side because once again you go into that we know Navi's going to ban Cash. So again, Cobble, Virtus.pro can beat anyone on that map. They now have a very strong nuke. They have Dust 2 is the big X factor, but if I'm VP, I guess you'd ban Dust 2 if you're VP in that scenario. Train would be scary. Navi would probably pick that, but I think on every other map outside of like Train, I think VP is going to be feeling very comfortable. Not to mention, I still feel like in these series, especially against like the really really good teams, it's incredible that Navi is able to win some of these series, considering the fact that Cobble feels like just a free win. It almost feels like every series they go into, it's going to start out 1-0 for the other team, just because Cobble has been so bad for them recently. Like it's actually scary to think about. If this team fixes Cobble and picks Duke or Cash and gets decent at it, this Navi team is going to be very very scary for a long time coming.
And obviously, VP doesn't really lose on Cobble a whole lot. I mean, they lost to Hellraisers here, but it was like first of all it's 16-14, and also who gives a fuck? I think they were already out the group anyway, so that might not even matter. Like, I actually think in this scenario, that's my problem, is the map pool goes to VP, and I still thought the map pool at ESL New York went to VP. I mean, remember, ESL New York was narrowly won by Navi, and with both Simple and Guardian going fucking God mode. So, I mean, I'm sorry, that's hard to happen again. So the difference is, I give, like, at the moment, form, routine, map pool, it's all edging me towards VP. So I feel like at the moment, VP's going to win just because of the bracket, I think VP's going to win the tournament. It's going to be Navi second. And I think, okay, we get SK, we get Dig and Sass top 4, not bad. Problem is, of those names, I mean, the one that really struggles it's SK, right? If they get beaten by VP again, and they only come top 4 here, now the conversation changes about SK going forwards, right? Yeah,
well, then the conversation turns into...
It's like Fnatic, right? Can they ever get back to winning again? I mean, Fnatic was super sick. They were all still top 4 all the time after. I mean, except for the.
If SK, this is going to seem like a fucking mad concept, but if SK goes out, if they get top 4 here, don't make it into the finals, or don't make it, say they get knocked out even in the quarters, even if they just don't make it to top 4, do they start having that conversation where they say 2 months before the major, let's make a change?
Here's the thing. I don't know if they do, because here's the thing. Unlike a lot of teams that are European teams, I don't know them that well personally. So unfortunately, I can't really predict which way they'd go if it came to that decision point, that crisis moment. But I will say this. Another of Thorin's principles is roughly every 9 months, most teams make a roster move. It has now been about 11 months since they made their roster move. And if you start to lose, and at that point in time, it's been, 3-4 months since you've had a win, you start to at least question it, right? Especially, bearing in mind, ELEAGUE this week is Immortals playing, so you're going to have all the reason. That's like a free audition for those guys there. If you do super well there, maybe you get into SK. It's not impossible. To put
I don't know. I've actually I've spoken to some of the Immortals guys in these past couple of days, and it doesn't seem like I actually asked this question.
Players lie.
I know. I actually asked, they absolutely do. But I actually asked if they felt worried that they were just going to be a farm team for SK. Like if SK wanted to make a change and they came knocking, are you guys worried that any of these players, say they came to Phelps and were like, "Hey, come join SK." Okay. Do you think he would do it? And they said no. And there's a reason why. There is a player on Luminosity.
Honey, if you were, that cute girl who's the waitress at the you wouldn't sleep with her, would you? No. I love you. I'm faithful. Then meanwhile, he just never had the opportunity. Then all of a sudden, he comes in for that, double and fries, and she goes, maybe you could call me after work. Do. All I'm saying, Moses, all I'm saying, mate. Chance would be a fine thing.
Here's one reason. Here's double
infidelity, of course.
Yeah, infidelity jokes always land.
Okay.
There is one player at Luminosity called SHZ. I believe that's the one they were talking about. Who this is like the next up and coming star, supposedly from Brazil, as this guy is supposed to be like a Phelps type player.
Okay.
So I know that was like a little bit of a reassurance to where they felt like that could be like a buffer between SK, like just going to Luminosity instead of, because you have to remember as well, Immortals has a lot of money as an organization. So if SK actually wanted to get one of those players, the buyout would be pretty unfucking real, especially if this team, wins the group in E-League, especially because they're about to go on this string of lands leading up to the major qualifier.
I can go ahead and confirm for you, even if it hadn't been the case before, 100% all Brazilian players on big orgs are now definitely nailed down to contracts. They're all signed. There's nothing pending and promises. Like, checks in the mail. It's like, there's none of that shit going on anymore. Everyone is locked down like a motherfucker.
Tight contracts.
I can go ahead and promise you that much, Moses. I feel like that's a given, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But, I mean, that's the thing. The buyout would be something unreal. Like, why would Immortals ever let anyone go? Especially, I don't even know, like, when you think about it, too, at this team, yeah, the paycheck in SK was more than likely bigger than what Immortals is getting paid. But with the run that Immortals has been on, and, like, the fact that if they have a good run here in these next couple months, because I know they're doing iBuyPower Masters, hopefully Oakland. I don't know if they're doing DreamHack Winter, but they have the major qualifier as well. They have Sao Paulo. If they start doing well at these events, why is this team thinking that they would make a change right before a major qualifier? Why, like, going into that? So I'm not even sure that they would agree to a change until after the major to begin with. So that would be interesting. I mean, I don't think this is likely to happen. I don't think SK is at the point, and I don't think that's the kind of team who's just going to say, we went from number 1 in the world to placing top 4 at 2 big events. Like, this is time to make a roster change. I don't think they're going to quite be in panic mode just yet until maybe after the major if they have a really weak performance. And
they've obviously got EPL to turn it around anyway,
Yeah. So just an interesting thought. I didn't know if you thought something different about them.
I will add in as well, though. One thing you always have to factor in is the thing I said about Dignitas on the last episode. Is like, even if the org doesn't want it, and even if the rest of the team's like, why would you leave? We're doing better than them right now. That pull is like some mad siren call. We all know it is. It doesn't matter if the other team's going shit. Like, here's the thing. Here's the reason why JW really wanted to join NIP. I mean, I don't mean literally. I mean just like I'm speculating. I'm not giving the literal reason he told me. What I mean is, even if to me and you, we're like, yeah, but they're worse than your team. And in fact, they're not doing very well. In their mind, they're always like, yeah, but that's because of that other guy. If I was on that team and then I had to get right in front, then I'd do, in their mind, It's like the dream tonight. It would all go great, And at the end, they'd win the tournament. And then obviously the first person that get right jumps up and he hugs them and goes, oh, JW, Jesper, I'm so glad you're in the team now. And then Jesper just looks off into the fucking sunset and his eyes just go like anime style. He's like, senpai. Just like some ridiculous fantasy wish fulfillment. And then obviously his alarm clock goes like, dur, 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 dur. Wake up, Jesper, time for practice. Like, I'm still in Fnatic. No, God said no. Yep, same shit. So like, just runs downstairs super quick to get his fucking Reese's Puffs cereal or some shit. Meanwhile, of course, flusha's over there, lifting his spoon like a motherfucker. And scene. That's the end That's not even that. I don't know. That's so absurd. It worked though somehow, didn't it? Like, what's ridiculous is you do lift spoons, but that made it funnier, the fact that it was so absurd that he's lifted a spoon,
So it's the Reese's Cups that really all pulled it together. That was one of my favorite fucking cereals growing up.
It's a shit, mate. Spoiler, I still have some now. That's what I have for breakfast every day. Because it's not really cereal,
Dude, I'm going to blow your mind right now. Okay. If you put that Reese's Peanut Butter Puffs box of cereal in the refrigerator,
okay,
and you just you have a bowl of cold Reese's Peanut Butter Puffs with milk in the morning. Same, you do everything the same, except you just store it in the refrigerator instead of the cabinet. It's going to be baller shit.
I'll give it a try. Okay. Yeah. See if I can be the flusher, lifting my spoon like a motherfucker. So, right. That's obviously Epicenter. By the way, aside from the flaw with the group stage, which is badly designed, I do like the system of Epicenter. Like, I kind of like this playoffs. I think it's pretty cool, I think it's cool that only one team goes out in group stages, because that what a pet peeve of mine is. I hate the idea that like the most limited amount of games, which is the group stage, are the ones that kick you out of tournaments when you might have gone to the finals. So I like kind of like second chances in that sense. I think it's cool. In fact, I mean, we can talk about this in the future, I'm sure, but I even think we should use a modified system of like a playoff type scenario this, but with like 12 teams for majors maybe, and have 3 teams out of each group there. So something to talk about in the future, something I'll tease everyone with. So now let's talk about the upcoming week of E-League, because just to give everyone the schedule, okay, so E-League comes up now, we've got Group A, then there's nothing the week after. I mean, it's this week, by the way, is E-League, because next week is EPL. So we'll talk about Group A of E-League, then we'll talk about EPL groups, because obviously Moses won't have time to do another episode, and then other E-League groups will have to be future episodes, because they'll be like weeks from now, 2 weeks from now. So we'll start with Group A. And the problem with starting with Group A, Moses, is that Group A is Mouse Sports, Cloud9, FaZe, Immortals. Now, you can already tell by one of those names, we can't actually talk about the groups, we have to talk about a roster move first, which is that the worst kept news in esports, which is now being confirmed, is that Carrigan is kicked from Astralis. We knew he'd been benched, which, by the way, means kicked in esports. He'd been benched, and now he's gone to FaZe, replacing, at the moment, they say Kiyashima. But then there was that mad story where maybe they're keeping Kiyashima on the side, and they're going to see if Jacob does badly, and then Kiyashima can get his spot. I remember you must have seen that like side story, which, by the way, could definitely be true, because remember, if you're on a huge contract like FaZe are, unless you have someone who's willing to buy Kiyashima, why would you get rid of him? Why not do that? Why not literally just say, hey, we're going to have a little, like that scene out of the fucking Dark Knight where he just snaps that pool cue like we're having tryouts. Like, that's fucking Kiyashima and Jacob just scrambling on the floor for a fucking pool cue to beat the other to death with. That's FaZe right now. FaZe up, motherfucker. I don't even know how you do that symbol. I don't have some sort of palsy or some shit. I can't do that. So,
I just realized that I just look like a fucking asshole
mad,
trying to
isn't
make it work. I guess
it's like Wu-Tang or some shit. I don't know. Anyway, so what do you think of Carrigan presumably becoming in-game leader of FaZe?
Yeah, I mean, you'd certainly fucking hope so. I'm very interested in this, and on paper, I like Kerrigan as an in-game leader. I will say the only reason this looks good is because, to me at least, is because FaZe just has never had an in-game leader. So obviously bringing anyone with that kind of experience in is an upgrade. Here's my one worry about it is Kerrigan as an in-game leader. When he took over in TSM and then Astralis, that team was already pretty well defined in terms of what roles each player filled. He got that he kind of inherited that from Fetish, where everyone kind of knew what they do.
He was literally the guy who basically got the fucking Ferrari that's got one little problem with it, and he fixed it. And then he was like, I made this whole Ferrari work. It's like, yeah, sort of, mate. Like someone else did sort of like help get the jam jar almost off, and then you came along at the end, you know.
Well, now he's inheriting, I don't know anything about cars. Some shit car. Some like I don't even know. Whatever. Like a beat down car. Needs a new paint job. Needs new fucking wheels, struts, the engine, everything. It needs a whole new change. So the question becomes for Kerrigan, while I liked his in-game leading in Astralis when he just kind of took over that team and he tweaked a couple things and made them better than what they were with Fetish, but never got them over the hump of actually being like a championship level team. With FaZe, he's probably going to have to go in and convince a bunch of star players that they need to play a specific role, and they're going to have to sacrifice, and he's got to start tweaking which roles each player is going to be in. And so that's going to be the struggle for him, and that's why it's a little bit worrying. I'm not ready to say this is a fantastic move. It's obviously a good move just because that was the one thing that FaZe has never had was the in-game leader. But still, I think Kerrigan has a lot of work to do. I think it's going to test all of his knowledge and experience as an in-game leader. So this isn't like some pickup that's going to turn this team around overnight. It's not like they just found the missing piece and they're going to be a stud now. This is going to be a project, and especially here at E-League, specifically for this E-League Group A, it still doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence in me that FaZe is going to be able to get out of this group because he's going to literally have had no time to have done anything in this team.
Okay, rather than just say that like your analogy about the car wasn't very good and I'm going to wreck you with a better one, I'll be like a teammate here, okay? What I'll say instead is you like had the basics and I'm going to pick up the baton and I'm going to run with it, okay? Because here's my version of the same analogy, right? Yeah, before, I agree. When he came into basically, it was Dignitas at the time and then it became TSM the next event. It is like he had like, someone basically had like the best food of all time inside a jam jar that was hard to get the lid off, but they'd almost gotten it off, and then he just came in like, pop, there we go, oh, I guess that was all me. Like, no, that was always the team. By the way, here's a great example. That's the team where Dazed always used to say privately, if I could ever be in-game leader of a team, I'd pick Dignitas. Because the Dignitas lineup was always sick. Like, they were the ones in scrims wrecking everyone. Online, they were super sick. But they always had that one tweak where they were off in the semi-finals, you know. So every in-game leader knew someone's going to come along and crack that sooner or later, and we all wish it was us, right? So, okay, I'll give Kerrigan credit. You still have to be the guy to do it. I mean, Fetish couldn't do it. They had their own issues in the team. But the difference there is it's an obvious one issue you're working on. I agree. The difference in FaZe is that you've got a lot of issues. But I'll say it like this. Rather than it be that the car's total shit, I'd say it's more like this. Instead of coming along and fixing the one thing, it's like I still think FaZe on the surface, it's like all the parts exist for the car. And they're in a junkyard, and you have to identify which part is which. But if you really had the skill to build a whole car, I mean, you're going to have to pretty much build this car from scratch. You're not just going to tweak one thing. You have to figure out where do I put which is the engine, what goes over here, and then you have to make it all fit together at the end. If you could do that, it's possible, but it's going to be really hard. So I have to say this. It's going to test his in-game leader skills more than any other team he's been on. But I don't think it's impossible. I mean, if I have to myself kind of theory craft quickly, I think that this is how it has to go. The one really positive, I think, for him is that, first of all, AZ is a fellow Dane. So first and foremost, anyone who knows AZ's career, like a lot of the Danish players will, they'll know that AZ can be a star player. He's very good. So if I'm Carrigan, first thing I do when I come in is AZ's going to be one of our star players. I'm going to put him in the spots he wants. I'm going to build around him. Now, the key thing for me is that the best performing player is Rain at the moment, but Rain isn't like a guy who you have to necessarily build the whole game around. He's quite a stable, versatile player. So the key thing is, this is my question mark. The only question mark I have in the team is actually Jacob, because my problem with Jacob is the reason he's super up and down is because I feel like he's the guy where he has to have direction and he has to be the superstar. I don't think he can. I think he's the guy where, because his personality is a bit more passive, I think he's been letting himself just play spots that I don't think he can play, And the problem is, because of his mad aim, he probably gets away with it half the time, You think, oh, it's okay, he can play it. But the thing is, a guy like him, I think you either make him your star or you have to get rid of him. He's the obvious person who has to be cut. That's why I don't even think they're wrong with this idea that if Jacob doesn't work with Carrigan, just bring Keo in, Difference is Keo's a little bit more reliable. He's not going to be as good, but he's a little bit more reliable. So for me, my logic goes like this. AZ's my star player. Hopefully Jacob's my star player. Rain's my all-around player who I give a bit of attention to, but in general, he kind of gets his own shit. He's self-reliant. And then obviously, we know Alu can play a supportive opening style. He can just be a stable player. He's not got a big ego. And that leaves Carrigan to do what he did in Astralis in theory, which is be the worst player, but just fill in the hole here and there, Just help someone else play. So I think the pieces are there. But you must acknowledge, first of all, I will just say this, in conclusion before I pass it back over, one thing I will say is, okay, I made it sound very easy there, but you notice every single role pretty much, except Carrigan and Alu's, is convincing a player that's his role, getting him to do it, and then hoping it works. So it's great to have the blueprint, doesn't mean you can do it though, right?
Yeah, well, and I just also want to point out the car analogy that you felt the need to one-up was your own. Just throw that one out there.
Yeah, but okay, well, if you're going to throw it back to me, it was good when I gave it to you, Moses. It was excellent. You took it and, much like this car, disassembled it and made it shit, and then rebuilt it in your own image, faulty, not quite making it all the way there, and coming up a little bit short. And see, that's how childish I am, Moses. I even go straight back to that again. It's
in my head, I thought you were going to make it some kind of fucking ridiculous bald joke, but you went short. I like it.
Which way was I going on that one? It was going to be one of the two, right? So. You don't sound convinced it can happen though, especially not in time for this group, for example. Yeah?
I think the one other, well, I mean, definitely not for the group. I mean, I just saw Kerrigan get into E-League at the studios yesterday or on Wednesday when he was in there. So I mean, imagine they have 2 days with Kerrigan unless this has actually been known for a week and he's been able to do some things online with them.
Or was he just humming la 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 like I say got my money? Doing phase up signs and shit.
I will tell you, he was all fucking smiles. So,
did he have a snapback on and fucking whatever that drink they drink is loving phase, love money as well. Brilliant. American dream, motherfucker.
My other big worry for this team is that we hear all these rumors at all the times when is some other team going to come in and poach Rain, poach Jacob? When is that going to happen? Because there have been rumors about it for a long time now. We're looking at teams like Fnatic and Godsent struggle to find talent. When does someone come with a baller offer over to Rain? When does his contract end? Is he going to stick around long enough? That if he leaves, that's a very important piece of this team that's just gone. And everyone seems to be very high on Rain at the moment. So he's got to be worried. I mean, same with that's my other big worry is that with this team being so underperforming for so long that one of these players just already mentally having checked out of this roster in a way. to where they don't even put enough effort in to make this work.
I mean, the two obvious ones is Rain and AZ, because first of all, AZ, there are 3 teams in Denmark who, in their own ways, could all use him. And, the key thing about AZ for me is, unlike Jacob, he's never had a bad enough period in this team that everyone's like written him off, you know. I think everyone in Denmark, by the way, he was the guy, he actually stood in for Dig at a couple of lands even. I even think that everyone else in Denmark's like, okay, AZ's just earning his money right now, and anytime one of us picks him up, we can all rehabilitate him. You know, we'll bring him back into a Danish lineup with tactics, and we can get the best out of him. And I think obviously for Rain, it's just the fact there's no Super Sick Norwegian teams all that's in theory stopping everyone like picking him up. So the key issue for me is that in theory, unless they have some weird contract, assuming they have the standard 1-year contract, I think it should be in the first few months of next year, because I think they went from G2 to FaZe in maybe February or March off the top of my head. No, maybe January, February, maybe end of January, early February, something like that, right? So, by the way, here's a sexy aspect in itself there. That would obviously then free up Keo for the same time the Envy and G2 contracts in theory run out. So that in itself's a thing. So I agree. For me, the whole FaZe thing was no one's going to leave the team because it's too expensive. Secondly, you're never going to leave the team even if you have the option, if you're not going to get as much money, because you get a lot of money in FaZe. And then thirdly, because it's so expensive, I think a lot of people have done what I actually suggested, if you remember my old NA video, which is if you have a player like Skirtle who you think can be a superstar, just look at when his contract ends and prep in advance. Do it like basketball, be like, right, I'm going to make my bid to him in April, I'm making the number up, obviously. In April 2017, I'm going to make my bid to Skadoodle. I'm going to say, right, don't sign the new contract. Hear me out. I'll make this team right. I think that's going to happen for me with FaZe, because it just doesn't feel like, unless Carrigan does a miracle, surely they can't all stay in this team, you know.
Well, I think there's actually a lot of pressure on this kind of a move, just because I think they have until the major qualifier. If they don't qualify for the major, I think that's when this team they would have gone a year, basically, because the last time we saw FaZe, which was G2 Kinguin at the time, which was Cluj and Apoka last year, that's the last time they've really done anything meaningful. So I think if they've gone a whole year with that, yeah, I think they're just fucking done. Yeah. I think they're just like, all right, well, this didn't work, and now we're just gonna get here. That's why I think, because there does come a moment as a player when your team is like that poor and that underperforming beneath expectations for so long, when you do check out mentally to a certain degree, where you just say, yeah, this isn't working, I'll play out the contract, and then you start, and in your mind you're already thinking, like, what are my options, where else can I go? You're starting to message other players, things like that nature. So I think especially if they don't qualify for the major, then there's going to be another roster change very, very early on next year. So this switch to Carrigan, this project, this car better be built pretty quickly. They've got about 2 months.
Plus, there's a trend, right, where, first of all, for NA orgs, this has always been like the stereotype people try to push, but especially for the COD orgs, because you know the big COD orgs, so we're obviously talking about like FaZe, Optic, I mean, to some degree envious, but not as much, because at least I know the owner there. The people always cynically say in the esports industry, oh, don't worry, those teams only care about making money and getting the sticker money and all the fans that buy all their shit, you know, which, by the way, there is a lot of that, but I always thought that goes too far. There's very few people in life are like so one-dimensional, like, just as there's very few people who are actually like evil to the extent that, like, yes, I am evil and I just want to ruin the world. Even evil people usually are like, no, I just happen to think this is my way, I should do something, you know. So in the same sense, there's very few teams in esports that really do like think, fuck it, just care about the money. Most want the money and to win. It's sure, if there are choices to lose and make money or to win and make none, yeah, they might have a hard choice there. But the key detail for me is, forget the players right now. Forget if anyone wants to buy them. Surely, sooner or later, a team with as much budget as FaZe has to say, we've got nothing out of this investment. We've been paying all this money. You know what? If contracts come up, why don't we bid for G2's team, for example? By the way, that would make G2 the most god-take org ever. Just keep boosting teams, selling them for the most money, getting a new one. That would make them the most next-level bargain hunters of all time.
I still haven't gotten off like the fucking... My brain still doesn't register the fact that they sold Scream for, like $150K, and then they get him back for free. And, like, that's madness.
And then he becomes better than the team that they sold.
That's so ridiculous. So... they sold Scream, and then they sold the entire team, and then got a team for, I don't know, whatever
G2.
it was.
They got G2 afterwards. Yeah.
It's just so madness. That would be fucking baller. What a way to build a fucking Korean org. Yeah, so I mean, this FaZe team, I don't see them, to bring it back full circle to the very beginning, I don't see them doing very much in this first group. Obviously, still a danger, especially, you know, in the first round.
So how does this group work, Moses? Explain it to us.
Okay, so, well, I mean, the whole schedule will be Friday. We're going to have 3 best of ones. So the change from last season is it's not the whole week, obviously.
And it's a GSL group, right?
Yeah, it's GSL group. In the first two, the upper bracket matches, they're going to be Mouse Sports versus Immortals, Cloud9 versus FaZe. It's BO1, so it's going to be, those will both be BO1s. The winners match as well, that'll be the televised match on Friday night. That's going to be a BO1 as well. And then every team moves into like the lower bracket of the GSL group, and the lower bracket is BO3s, and that's on Saturday, so there'll be two BO3s on Saturday.
So even the losers match is BO3?
Yeah, only the losers matches are BO3. Yep, losers match is BO3, and then the second place match.
Right. So bearing in mind we're talking about best of ones, also you need to now explain what is in the best of one. What is the pick ban format?
Pick ban. I mean, it's essentially it's banned down to 2 maps and then randomized from the 2 remaining maps, and then there's a coin flip to decide which team bans first, and whoever bans first, the other team picks their choice of or their side choice on the maps.
So this is actually the same best of one system that we had at the major, because when you get the coin flip, okay, if you win the coin flip, what you're actually choosing is either A, to get 3 bans instead of 2, because you're the banning team bans first, or to pick the side that you start on the map that comes out. So if you remember, I'll give you an example. When NIP played against Optic, they chose to be Team A, and they just banned out Optic's 3 best maps, and then Optic could choose the side. Whereas some other teams, Na'Vi, for example, in that group, chose to be the team that picks the side and only did the 2 bans. And then obviously, at the end, instead of having 3 maps to random, we have 2 left, and then you random from that. So in theory, here's the one thing I'll give credit to in this system. I'm still not a huge fan of it. I like to ban down a 1, but at least it removes 1 extra map out of the bullshit randometer. Because one thing I hated about the 3 maps is it felt like there were too many times where the team that was shit needed the 1 of the 3, and they got it in some mad miracle. Like, this is rigged. Are you Hillary Clinton? That just probably got our YouTube fucking taken off already. The whole channel's closed, Moses. It's suspended.
Yeah,
so
it's been a good time, Duncan. Okay. It's been fun.
By the way, I'll even admit, I'm too much of a pussy to put the subtitle as "Are you Hillary Clinton? This is rigged" or something like that.
I was going to write that
down. I'm too scared.
We'll cross that one out.
Even I'm going to say Ixnay on that one, you know.
Nip is a fat chick. All good. Hillary, this is rigged.
Listen, Nip can't shut this video channel down, and that's a very important distinction to make. Okay, so now it's actually bearing that in mind. I mean, obviously, like on this one, we're not going to go as ham as we did on episode. We're not going to literally go through what everyone will ban and go all the way down. But just thinking roughly, who do you think is going to win Mouse Sports and Mortals?
Mortals. I think, still, Mouse Sports has, they have the old Oscar situation. Now they have Lowell in, a little bit of experience. I think Immortals is sneakily like a very big dark horse, not only in the group, but even going down towards the playoffs, if they make it. I think this team is going to be good. They've been playing really, really well online, which doesn't mean too much in the sense of their accomplishments online, but just you can see in the way they're playing, this team is functioning very, very well. Phelps is, one of those emerging stars. I think they've got a lot of good pieces. The one X factor for Mouse Sports, I think, is obviously Nico. We don't even really need to say too much about him. We saw him like last year, even in the playoffs, carry his team single-handedly. And now, actually, to be fair, they've got Chris J next to him, who's been playing very, very well recently. So he's emerged as like the second star of this team, and he's been doing it pretty consistently since last E-League season. I'm not quite sold on Mouse Sports. Still kind of the same situation where they can do it, but you're never going to pick them to because it requires some massive Herculean effort out of Nico.
Okay. Just play out the rest of the do a dry run. So C9 FaZe who wins.
I'm going to take Immortals in that matchup, and then Cloud9 FaZe. I'm going with my boys Cloud9. I think this was actually going to I think could be a very cool matchup just because of the play styles of each team is very aggressive. But I think Automatic and Stewie are just playing so incredibly well right now. Nothing can be that third star where he doesn't have to perform every match, but when he does, it's just lights out. Skadoodle I still think is very, very quietly solid. And then, like I said, with Kerrigan coming in, I still think there's going to be a lot of disorganization in the team, but I just don't have confidence that they're going to be able to actually pull it out. I mean, I don't even know who the star of that FaZe team is quite yet. So that'll put Immortals and Cloud9 in that winners match, and I take Immortals to win that and go out first in this group.
Okay.
We do the lower bracket as well?
Yeah, just run through who you think.
So then the first losers match would be Mouse Sports FaZe. I'd take Mouse Sports in that one. I think FaZe is going to go out last. And then moving on from there, it'd be Cloud9 and Mouse Sports. And I will take Cloud9 again. Okay. So I think Cloud9 will go out second.
Yeah, here's the thing. I have the exact same matches playing out roughly. Basically, Immortals goes first and Cloud9 comes second, especially because actually the best of 3 part, I think that's what makes me certain that it's IMT Cloud9 going out here, because it doesn't matter who wins the upper bracket match. I think whoever goes bottom is winning a best of 3, so I don't think it matters for those teams. So I think it makes it a bit more certain. I will say the winners match is the one that I'm not as sure about, because I think that really is map dependent. Cloud9 Immortals, a lot of ways that could go. Yep. But again, I think the safety net is there for both teams. In fact, actually, I hope that the fact that if you Cloud9 Immortals, you can get best of threes lower bracket means that you kind of just play without fear pretty much in the upper bracket. You know, you just go all out and you see who wins. I think this group actually is not actually that sexy. Like it looks like it has parity on paper, especially because Matt FaZe in the old lineup famously used to always win the first map of the groups, you know. But I actually think that if you look at the form and the strengths of the teams now, I think that's a little bit of an illusion. And that actually Mouse with a brand new player and FaZe obviously having to adapt overnight to what in future might be a good move, probably can't really get on the level of the other two, in my opinion, now.
I think the biggest X factor of this group at the moment is with this roster change of that Kerrigan coming in for FaZe. We've seen it. There could be some just like fucking ridiculous honeymoon period where this team just comes in and they're just like, all right, you know, no pressure. We just have a roster change and just steamroll some motherfuckers with all that talent. That's
the problem, though. Here's the thing, right? If they did that in a group like, for example, Group D, where it's like not super strong elsewhere, like Dignitas, Fnatic, Envious, Optic, you know, in that sort of group, I think that could happen. The problem I see here is even if you have the sick honeymoon phase, you are still playing Cloud9 or Immortals in a best of three, probably. Unless you have the super sick best of ones, I guess. You're right on that one.
Yeah, I think the only way they get out of this group is winning the two best of ones.
But, you know, it's going to be tough to get a full best of three if you're a brand new team, especially when you don't know your own maps. Okay, so that's E-League. Now let's just give our thoughts on the groups for Pro League. Now remember, the groups here is 2 groups, 6 teams in each group, and it is pure round robin, and it's best of 1 presumably, right?
Yep, best of 1 round robin.
So it's best of 1 round robin. So it's essentially the exact same as IEM Katowice in terms of both aspects of the format, right?
And then it's also the same as Epicenter, where 3 teams move on from each group, and the number 1 team in each group goes straight to semis, and then the next 2 teams get put into the quarters.
Okay, so Group A is the one that actually, I'm just going to say it's actually not looking super sick right now. Like, it looks all right, but the problem is the names are a mess. So you've got Fnatic, God knows what to expect for them. Immortals, they're pretty solid. Mouse Sports, no one knows what to expect. Optic, unfortunately in this group, you don't really expect massive things, but there's some upset potential. Envious, not there yet, but gradually getting their way back. And Team Liquid, problem is we've only really got 1 LAN to judge it off, but looked good at New York. So with that said, Group A, which 3 teams get out, Moses?
Oh, fucking hell. I'm going to take Immortals getting out. I'm going to take Envious getting out. And I'm going to take... You know, I'll just fucking do it. I'm going to take Liquid to get out. I'll go with it again. That BO1. That scares the shit out of me. Fuck. Yeah, I'll take Liquid. I think Immortals, Envy, and Liquid get out of Group A. Because I don't see the thing is I almost want to say Optic has a great chance of getting out, but I think it's just too early after New York that they went on that crazy run where G2 was in a funk. Astralis, we know that they're not playing well in any sense of the word lately, so I think they actually got a benefit of not actually beating teams, but more so, you know, just taking advantage of like teams in a really bad spot. I think that was like a freak occurrence for G2, and Astralis just doesn't look great.
Like, the problem I have with this group is, like, Immortals, bear in mind 3 teams get out. Like, Immortals for me is the most well-rounded team. They're the one that I know the most of, you know. So I feel like they've got to get one of the 3 spots. Admittedly, when it's best of 1, it's hard to know who can finish first in that. But I'll give Immortals. I think Immortals is a lock, okay.
Yeah.
The big issue here is, I also agree on Envious. Like, I think they've shown enough signs and they're getting a bit more stable. They're not world beaters by any chance. Like, I don't think you can go super deep. But they're getting legit, right? So I'll take Envy as well. So then for me, it's actually a toss-up. Like, for the last one, I either go with Team Liquid using, like, their New York logic, or I go with Fnatic, actually. Because I still think Fnatic, the key thing about Fnatic that I actually like is, as much as they're not anywhere close to old Fnatic and they haven't got it all together, they're also not as bad as actually they look like they can be, you know. Like, they somehow still get wins and they're still all right. So I actually think that I'm going to pick Fnatic for this one, mainly because, unfortunately, it wasn't that it was a honeymoon period in Liquid at New York, it's just that was like a one-off performance from ELEAGUE. If he can do that again, fair play. At that point in time, I have to put my hands up and say, you know, maybe you're legit, maybe you can do this. But that was like not just a good form. That was like bonkers what he did in that one LAN. So personally, I'm just going to say that Fnatic, they've got just enough to do it. So I'm taking Immortals, Envious, Fnatic. Right. Group B. This is the one that is Cloud9, obviously very highly ranked in my ranking. NIP with Makaleli, key distinction to make there, but just went out of Epicenter. SK Gaming, number 2 ranked team for a lot of people. I mean, some people, I think my HLTV might still have them number 1, I'm not sure. FaZe Clan, obviously with Carrigan in the mix now, and that'll be their second event. They'll have obviously played this week. NRG, who obviously is the one name on this whole tournament that's just like, what? But they qualified. Like, that's how online CS works, guys. And then the last team is Dignitas, who obviously we've already both like given pretty high billing. So what 3 teams make it out of this group?
Yeah, which ones are my Pelicans? Dignitas, obviously. SK, not going to give up on that yet. And I think the last toss-up has got to be between Cloud9 and NIP. And I actually... I'll take NIP on this one. I'll go with them again, actually, to beat out Cloud9.
Yeah, because the thing is, the first 2 picks for me are similar to you. Like, again, with the Immortals logic, same for Dignitas. I think Dignitas is a lock to get out. Like, the difference is they're the one I can't see performing so badly against these 5 opponents that they don't get out. So I'll take Dignitas a lock. I think SK, come on, like, they haven't fallen that far yet. They're still good enough they can do this. So the real question is what you do for the third one. Like, obviously, we're ignoring the notion that FaZe not only picks it up now, but in a week from now, you know, it's more time, they figure something out. I don't think you can. I think it's unfair to predict that because no one can know. Right. So the question is Cloud9 NIP, because at the moment, there's good reasons for both. Like, Cloud9 being pretty stable, being pretty legit, but NIP, I mean, we all know if they turn up with some crazy form, dude, they could come first in this group. That's how nuts it is. So the problem I have here is, like, oftentimes I like to go on reliability, so I feel like Cloud9's the reliable one, but I also think that NIP, it's very rare they're ever going to do really badly. Like, think about how many games they probably have to lose to go out of this group. So in a weird way, I kind of feel like you have to side with NIP, even though I actually think at the moment, if you ask me between the two, I'd probably say I think Cloud9's slightly better than NIP overall, you know.
My biggest issue with Cloud9 right now, and probably the biggest reason why I'm not picking them to get out of this group, because I'm with you in that their recent form, Cloud9 has obviously been the better team. I think there's a crash coming for this Cloud9 roster. I think much like we saw last summer when they had that run with Sean and everything, that lineup where they got those three finals. I think there is a crash coming for Cloud9, and the reason why I say that is because I think they're just so reliant on Stewie and Automatic right now, and I don't think they're doing anything tactically that impressive. I think with Stewie calling, it's very, very basic stuff, and it's very much like he's going to make a play that'll open everything up. But outside of him and Automatic right now, I don't see a whole lot of impact from the other 3 players when Automatic and Stewie haven't done something. So I see this Cloud9 team, like I had a big conversation with Daze of this when he was out in LA with EPL, and he even when he was out for Pro League, he even tells me that he knows what tactics, like how Stewie is calling, because Stewie, when he plays in Rank S, he's calling very similar shit for the pug teams that he is in Cloud9 right now. It is very much like Rank S tactics.
Why is North America like this, Moses? How did you beat him? Well, I was in a pug with him last week. He was doing all the same shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, because you could even watch it in his play. It's like,
imagine telling like Bill Belichick that or something. That's what's happening. He'd have like a fucking aneurysm or something. You're like, what? Why the fuck would you do that?
No, but he's saying it's very, very similar calling to what he hears out of Stewie in Rank S, because it is about like some spot. Stewie's going to go to some spot very aggressively and try and make a play, and usually he's going to be successful against the NA teams. And by the way, we've seen not only in finals but against European teams in general, Stewie is less effective. That playstyle is getting punished more because Europeans are like, all right, yeah, please do that. Like, we'll take it. We'll take that fight. Now they've had a good run of form against other teams, but now, I mean, this now comes down to, does Cloud9 have enough built up behind these 2 players being so incredibly elite recently, and Automatic and Stewie? Do they have enough built up to adjust if that style is not working? Because they haven't shown that yet. Now teams are going to say, we're getting used to the style. We've seen him play at a couple other tournaments. We kind of know what's going to happen. We know Stewie's going to be aggressive. We know he's going to be doing ridiculous things. If we stop it, what do they have? And that's my big question mark with the Cloud9.
Oh, and I just want to bring up one other storyline. So in this group, NRG is going to get straight banged on. Like, they're going to be at like, you ever get your shit pushed in? That's like the status they're going to be at in this group. It's like, it's going to be a bad week for them.
Do you think they're going to win a map?
Here's the problem. If you know how bullshit Counter-Strike is, when you've got like, whenever you have like a joke team, it feels like inevitably they get like the miracle 1 win. Like maybe they beat FaZe, or maybe they get some mad upset over like NIP or something mental, but they're not getting out of this group, put it that way.
No, they're not. Are you going to give them 1 win?
I'll just say no, because why the fuck would I? Like, logically, I can't. I just know that the gods are cruel. So maybe they can steal someone else's playoff spot, not for themselves, but for someone else. Like for example, if they did upset Nip, that's what probably fucks Nip versus the Cloud9, scenario. But they're going to get straight ruined.
Yeah, here's because what's fucked up about this team is that they have to play in the European minor. Like this team, I'm so worried for this team in a certain way because they're going to get banged out here, and then they have to go through the entire European system with 3 German players to even get to the major qualifier if they're going to try and qualify. So that's interesting. That'll be fun. But the reason why they're here, I'll tell you right now. The style they play with Gabi, it's a style that's like not meant to like win games. It feels like it's very fundamentally strong.
Why is North America like this, Moses? Please, mercy, please have back.
But if you watch, it's literally just like straight up like defaults, just like do nothing, like just don't fuck up. The style of this game is to just be like minimize mistakes.
So the thing is, guys,
actually ever go get the wins. They don't ever go make the plays, and then they're relying on like Peter to get a pick, which we know on land that's going to happen less frequently. So I don't. It works against NA teams because NA teams are going to make those kinds of mistakes. FaZe is a team that might make those kind of mistakes, but SK more than likely won't make mistakes to the extent that they'll lose. Dignitas definitely won't. Cloud9 probably steamroll them. Actually, that's a regional matchup. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Do you think when they're on the plane over, they just like literally fucking strap Peter down, like no toilet for you? It's like, but
to be fair. The last time he had his leg broken, I think they just bring a baseball bat. That was the time. That was the biggest upset they had.
Yeah, but they've already got Thorin in the lineup already, so it doesn't work anymore.
Who could they bring in? They could bring someone in, certainly. It's got to be someone.
I just can't believe that you've described their style out. See, the secret is they're thinking we're going to try and win the game. Nah. Why would I do that?
Oh, yeah.
They'll never expect it. We're going to lose the game. But you know what? We're going to lose the game like they don't even imagine. What are you going to do? Some secret tactics? No. Do the same tactic over and over again, default style. But what would the point of that be? Yeah, exactly. You don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. Well, you just said you're going to do defaults. You know exactly what I'm going to do. Yeah, come on. Why don't you just play against my default style? Well, I will, but I'm better than you, so I'll probably win. Yeah, yep. I bet you will, son. I bet you're going to fucking love winning that, you little cunt.
Listen, let's put it this way.
I can't handle it.
This is the team at Northern Arena that lost to CLG on land 2-1 the first time that lineup ever played together. Hayes, Cutler in their slumps, Kusta, Ethan, and Sabrosa, those two probably at their first professional LAN. And they lost to him 2-1.
Well, until Sabrosa says, "Ayo, I'm tired of using technology," then that's what's going to happen, Moses. So get prepared for that to keep happening. So,
yep.
Right, that's the group predictions. Okay, I obviously won't go through all the playoff matches, etc., because obviously who the fuck knows who'll come first, second, and third in a 6-team best-of-1 group. Who do you think is going to win the event, though? Because remember, there's no Virtus.pro here. There's no Na'Vi here. That's the interesting part, right? The two teams that we've got in the final of Epicenter will not be at this tournament. So who wins the event?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to go all in on Dignitas.
Okay, that's nice. I like that. Because here's the thing. I think that for me, the three obvious names it's Dig, SK, Immortals. And so the key thing it comes down to for me is like this. First of all, unfortunately for SK, they're kind of in a no-win scenario. They almost have to win the event. But even if they win the event, everyone will go, yeah, but VP and Na'Vi went there. So like you can't almost win in that one, you know? So the key thing for me is, the one question I still have about Dig is also if they get to like a final or a semi, do they have any choke in them? Because obviously some of these players aren't used to winning, you know. They haven't done that yet mentally. So that's where I feel like if you're SK, you could get an edge on them. Then add in that if SK plays Immortals, you've still got that little edge there where you're the big brother, they're the little brother, you know, like that you're supposed to beat them. So I feel like SK in a weird way has a pretty good setup for this event. And so the interesting thing is I'm actually going to agree. I think it's going to be Dignitas. For me, I think Dignitas and Immortals are the two most solid teams here. I think they're both got the best chance to make it deep. And I'll take Dig just because I think, like, if I have to add up all my reasons, I think the math comes out best for them at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this would be like a good event for SK to just come in, exert some dominance, and just kind of show the world that they haven't gone yet. I think it'll be interesting to see. I think a lot is going to depend on these 2 days off they have at Epicenter and see like what they're looking like in that bracket phase or in the playoff phase of Epicenter. See if they can still reach some kind of a peak to do some damage.
I'll give you a wild card as well. right? I'm not picking this. That's my top 3 teams, right, to have a chance to win. But the ultimate wildcard's obviously still Nip. I mean, they still could come in some one-off form. Remember, the good thing for them is there is no Na'Vi, there is no G2, there is no VP. They could just come in some mad form and just tear through. What in fair, yeah, okay, Dignitas pretty good in most, but these are still beatable teams for Nip.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if you want to go like a real ultimate wild card, I mean, I'll just go with NA and say Cloud9. I mean, because we've seen them have
to
deep
win the
runs.
event?
There's no reason, and that's the crazy thing, because Cloud9 and Nip, the two kind of wild cards that we just said could win the event. One of them is probably not going to make it out of groups.
That's my problem, though, is that personally, like, I don't have Cloud9 as a wildcard myself, because my issue with them is Nip have, like, the crazy explosive factor where they could do it. But my problem with Cloud9 is I feel like they're exactly the sort of team that doesn't want to see Immortals and Dignitas in the playoffs. Like, because they're like, Cloud9 themselves are pretty solid now. They're pretty good, decent team. You kind of know where you're going to get from. So to me, Dignitas and Immortals are just slightly better versions of Cloud9. So I always hate that kind of a matchup, you know. I'd rather be like G2 or Nip going against some team that will blow me out most of the time, but the other time I'll just go mental and kill them. I hate to be the team where it's like they're like a 10% better version of me, because that's like you're supposed to lose that a lot, you know. You're supposed to just you grind it out, they grind it out, and then they're better at grinding it out, you know.
I'll ask you this question: with Cloud9, have you gotten to the point where you've given up on like Skadoodle or Shroud?
Because the problem is, the one I've given up on Shroud, I mean, we've kind of been back and forth on who we would kick, etc. Like, here's the thing. I don't think Skadoodle's been good, and I certainly think being a primary AWP, it's a big liability if you're not doing that well. That's problematic. But the key thing is, for me at the moment, I think Shroud's the guy where if he doesn't have like a proper role, like he's not playing well, he just disappears completely in the team. So it's a waste of time at that point in time. I will say this, all the recent success has been without either doing super duper well. Yeah. So I'll say that. That's crazy. My problem with their team, I mean, it's an old problem. First of all, Shroud isn't being a star player. Now, they're getting over it at the moment because they've got Omike and Stewie. Cool. But then my other issue is, it's not just those two. The third guy joining the pack is Nothing. And again, if you've noticed, Thorin has not really gone broke over his career, betting against Nothing to consistently play super well against internationally. There's another one that he has, like, that's like the fucking stock market and I'm Warren Buffett, mate. I might take some losses, but I'm reigning in Skriller at the end, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I see. I think this event.
Mike, do you think one of them turns around? Do you think someone does an upturn at some point?
Skadoodle, I think is. I think I'm hoping Skadoodle has a really good event. I think from what I've seen online of him recently, I've seen a much more like a willingness to dominate the game. But I mean, who knows? That could just disappear in the next 3 days. See, my biggest issue with those two guys, I haven't like given up on Skadoodle. I've pretty much given up on Shroud, if I'm honest. But I think the big thing is I wish the reason why is I just don't see the mentality that's required for them to be good players. If I'm one of those two fucking players and Stewie gets picked up in January and he's never played a professional game of Counter-Strike, the only competitive experience he has in general is rank S and is, you know, a premier pug team that he was on. Yep. And he becomes the best player and the face of this team within like 7 months. I'm just like fucking furious that I have slacked off so much.
I mean, that's the issue, right? Like the basic question for them isn't why it's where's your self-respect? You know? Yeah. You're the fucking star player.
Yeah, and like Stewie's now the face. This is his team. This is now Stewie's team. There's no question about it. Even Automatic, who was brought in to be a role player, is playing better than all of the 3 other players next to the 2 of them. So it's just like where is that kind of pride? Where is that desire to say, all right, these 2 youngsters show up? And it's very obvious if you know Stewie, like even just watching him streaming on Twitter, when he's not practicing, he's fucking streaming rank S and he's taking it fucking serious. I know from talking to him that he, like when he started out in these first 6 months that he was on the team, he was grinding demos. I don't know how much he's doing that nowadays. But regardless, like he's putting the work in. Why are those 2? Why are the veterans not? How is the new guy showing up to this extent? So I'm furious if I'm one of those guys. Probably not at Stewie, not at like the team or anything, but at myself. I'm just saying, why? Like, what the fuck have I been doing?
Yeah. I mean, I agree that should be the case. Problem is, I mean, that should have happened a long time ago as well.
Yeah, I mean,
like, they should have really have got. If they were going to do it, you'd think they'd do it, right?
Well, yeah, the personalities are just so passive. You know, that kind of shit probably doesn't bother them. Just like, oh, cool. We just got another the roster. I mean, how lucky is Cloud9 to have been to have? I mean, even regardless of what we're talking about with Shroud right now, when they picked him up years ago, that was like a huge pickup to have a player that turned out to be as skilled as he was.
Sure.
Because at the beginning of his career, he had some very, very good LAN matches. This is why everyone's always so disappointed, because at the time, admittedly, in CS:GO, the individual skill level wasn't so deep across all these teams. So Shroud actually looked a lot better in like his first 6-8 months on that team. Had some really, really good tournaments, and definitely in that run last summer. But they've gotten very, very fortunate with some of these risky pickups they've done.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about it as well is, like, I don't think that they've just got some genius system for getting players and they're always getting the right player, blah, 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 etc. Like, no. I'd actually say, like, what's funny is at the moment the team that's doing that in CSGO is Dignitas. Like, how the fuck do these guys keep losing good players and then getting the next player they need? They've done a better job of recruiting than Astralis have, so nuts. But I think in Cloud9's case, they've gotten just a bit lucky on some of those. I mean, some of those, like, remember, this is the detail that Cloud9's players deny, but it's so stupid because I can tell you it's factually wrong. Stewie was like their fucking 7th choice or something.
Yeah.
They didn't even pick him.
Yeah, I mean, they got to the point where they were just like, they had to cross so many players off the list that said no, that they were just like, all right, well, at this point, we either take a node, we gamble on like a node quantity and we know what we're getting, or we just gamble on a player that has never played competitively, but we know he's got skill. We'll see what comes of this. And again, just lucky. So kudos. I mean, kudos to them for getting lucky. Whatever. Especially considering the fact that, like we just outlined, if Stewie is like less hardworking as a player as he turned out to be, that gamble doesn't pay off.
Well, especially because the atmosphere would have killed the team.
Yeah, and you have no one on that team that's like sitting down with Stewie and like going over a demo with him. I'm sure. So there's no actual coach with Counter-Strike experience on that team who's like sitting with him and teaching him some of the nuances. So, yeah. But yeah, I think Dignitas is a cool pick to win this event. This is going to be an interesting event without VP and Navi there.
Okay, here's the one factor we didn't talk about though, is in Group A. Okay, I don't buy into the Optic hype from New York, right? I'm just going to say it outright. Like I think that was a very underwhelming performance in G2 that I think you've already seen doesn't happen again at Epicenter. I think G2 is better than they showed there. The Astralis one, literally. That wasn't just a loss for Astralis. That literally made them change their fucking team overnight. So you can tell they didn't think that was acceptable. And then beating, who was the other? No, that was it. It
was a close loss to VP. It was like a 16-14 loss to VP.
So the thing is, I don't buy the hype. Like, I don't think Opti can make it out of the group. But I will say this, that with some of these teams that are like, okay, for example, Mouse Sports, a bit questionable on some maps. Fnatic, they don't really have a whole lot of like key strengths in terms of maps at the moment. I mean, Liquid weren't even supposed to be here. They've only had the one LAN. I certainly think Optic can do some spoiling in this group, and they can win maps. They could win a map or two.
Yeah, Liquid is still like, despite the fact that I said I think they'll get out of this group, there's still a huge question mark on which Liquid we're going to get, if they're even going to be able to compete in this group. I will tell you, within the region, and I'm sure to a certain degree international, let's start within the region. Within the region, there is a lot of feeling from some of the top teams at the moment right now that Optic within the next within a few months is going to be a very, very dangerous team in the region. The players, the lineup they have, like definitely looking positive. I'm not fully buying into the New York hype about this Optic team just for the same reasons you outlined. Partially buying into it in terms of the regional competition that is weaker to say this team is definitely on the right track to improving within NA. Okay. I'm assuming internationally some of the tier 2 teams are obviously going to be a little bit looking at Optic and saying that's now a dangerous team that we have to worry about. I don't think the tier 1 teams really give a shit quite yet. But definitely for someone in Optic that hasn't had great success, even Tarek individually hasn't had great successes, this is a team that's looking positive. Just again, I mean, think about this. This is the first time we're going to see this lineup with Mixwell not upping. Which, by the way, despite all the positives I just said about Optic, from talking to top players and top in-game leaders in NA, everyone's questioning this move for Mixwell not to be an opper. Everyone's questioning it.
Oh, I would question it. Like, here's the thing. I agree he's a skilled player. He could probably get away with rifling, but his impact came from AWPing as far as I'm concerned. That's why I never bought that storyline as well, that it was like, oh, he AWPs, but he does it in such an unselfish way where, like, he just does it when, like, the team needs it. Like, that's not how it works being a star player who's an AWPer. Yeah. It's the other way around. I mean, by the way, here's the genius. If you can make that work, if you can actually be the star player and you're the AWPer, and really the team does play around you, but you kind of like tell people in the team, no, I'm going to do what you guys need, and you make them believe that, you can probably make it, you have a really good like morale in the team and people feel like they're needed and wanted. But at the end of the day, if you're some superstar AWPer, you also say, give me the AWP now, please. I'm going to go and get this kill.
The issue as well is like, if they have a fucking sick AWPer on this team, fine. I'm fine with Mixwell giving it up. But look who's there to replace him. Tarek and Naf. Those are the other two options to AWP. And we already know Naf doesn't like AWPing on T sides. He AWPs on CT sides. And it's even when Mixwell was AWPing, Naf AWPing was like map to map. He's still not a great AWPer to begin with. He's just serviceable in certain scenarios, which is why he doesn't use it all the time. And then Tarek, if you give him the AWP on a T side, you're taking away his primary strength as a player. And by the way, him joining the team as a rifler is what has really unlocked this team to have those upsets at New York and to have this great run of form in the region. So, I mean, you're kind of hamstringing yourself. That's just very worrying. So that's the next step for them. I don't like it. I don't think it's going to look good, to be quite honest with you. I think if you look at this group, I could see them taking a map off Liquid and maybe Mouse Sports if something crazy happens, but I still think they only get out of this group with 1 win, maybe 2 max.
I don't think they can get out. That's the problem. I think,
well, not get out of the group, but like they'll be eliminated of the group with 1 or 2 wins. Sure, 1 or 2 wins.
Let me think. See, I have to say one last topic I want to address, okay? I agree, okay, that logically, I think, theoretically, right, there's a reason why a lot of the good teams do still make all these offline finals, right? It's only usually 1 or 2 upset teams that make the offline finals that you don't expect to. And then as a result, you're like, oh, that's kind of a shame. I wish online wasn't like this and all the rest of it. My big problem is everyone look right now at those 2 teams we talked about. So Virtus.pro is the best team in the world. Na'Vi is certainly very good. And neither are at this EPL Finals. Now forget EPL for a second, because by the way, it does lower their event if SK wins it but gets banged out everywhere else, for example, right? Or if Dignitas really wins it and then there's no VP to test them against. That kind of fucks with it for ESL. But even worse, if you're VP and Na'Vi, you can't just not, when you're in your prime, when you're really good, you can't just be missing lands where there's 200k first place. Like, I don't know the solution, but well, there is an obvious solution, which is somehow fix the format a little bit of invites. So, but it's all the same. If you're those 2, I don't know what you do, but you just can't keep doing this, guys.
Yeah, no, it's atrocious. And I think Virtus.pro is like probably the most egregious one of it, obviously.
I mean, this is exactly when they need to be just raking in all the titles, right?
Well, I mean, I know I think we've mentioned on the show, and I know you and I talked about it a bunch in private, is that like window of opportunity that teams have to like win these championships to become the best team. It's so small these days. It is very much like a road. It almost feels like it's like 2-3 months when you have like this peak form, and then you slip a little bit again. Maybe a roster change has to happen, but regardless, you slip in form, and then it takes like a month or 2 to get back into it. And I mean, Virtus.pro is the most egregious one long term. But I mean, if you look at Na'Vi, the streak of shit that they went on in Pro League at the end of this season is ridiculous. Like it's actually quite embarrassing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They went 2-10 in the last 12 matches of this online.
Like, portion. People don't get. Like, when I say I don't like the system, that's what I mean. I mean, I know the way the system works, and I agree the way the system works is the way it should work, because the teams that won the matches. What people don't seem to understand, Moses, and keep trying to explain to me, is that when I say, okay, I agree, online they are worse, but the problem is, I know online Na'Vi would beat whatever team we're talking about here. Idiots will tell me, but if they would beat them offline, then why didn't they just win the online game? Again, you're the person who's not getting it at this point. I understand the concept. I'm saying that I don't think a system where you can get wrecked online like that. By the way, Na'Vi should win those games. Great. Unfortunately, okay, maybe there is no solution. But here's the problem. If there's no solution, by the way, ESL doesn't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that you just have to have 2 great teams every time, not make the LAN finals. They want a world in which they can have all the good teams and let people qualify online. So they're in my corner, mate. They're trying to work to find some solution, because the solution isn't just to say, shit is what it is, and we just don't get the best teams. Because otherwise, like my original comment that sparked that whole Reddit thread, you end up with scenarios where this tournament should be one of the best of the year. But at the moment, you can't look at it and say it's one of the best of the year. I mean, it can't even be top 5 without these 2 teams, especially not VP, right?
If Na'Vi and VP are here, this is probably the best tournament of the second half of the year. Trying to think of outside of the majors, this is probably one of the best events of the year. And that's I think the most.
Well, put it this way. Let me frame it like this. This event coming right after Epicenter is what kills it a bit, though, because Epicenter has a better lineup, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, with VP.
Admittedly, no NA teams. That's a bit unfair, but you know what I mean. Just because it has all the killer European teams, Epicenter makes this event not look as hype, you know.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's actually pretty hype in terms of some of the storylines with them missing. Like, what's the next team that can step up? Can SK find
That's always a good narrative.
But yeah, outside of that, it's not as heavy hitting. Certainly.
Like for example, no one can win this event and become the best team in the world.
Trust me, though, you have to imagine that of everyone who is bothered by the lineup of this event, ESL is probably up there as the most, not having VP, not having Navi. They're probably ones being like, fuck, this sucks. But yeah, I think it mostly stems that kind of question of the.
Well, no doubt, Moses. I mean, I can already imagine the ESL offices. It's like this, okay? Like, oh fuck, Navi and VP missed it. VP missed it. Didn't we give them that like extra spot? Yeah. And then didn't we do like a fan vote to let them get the spot? Yeah. And they still fucked it all up. Yep. So what are we going to do then? We need VP and Navi there. Why do we need VP and Navi there? Listen, I can't say that publicly. I have to keep that secret. Okay, whatever. I mean, we just need VP and Navi there. Dring. Oh God, that red phone's ringing. What do you mean? You know the one with the hammer and sickle on? It's ringing. What is that phone for again? You were told the phone would never ring, and if it rung, someone has to answer immediately. Right? Okay, I guess I've got to do it, haven't I? Okay, let me answer the phone. Hello. Sorry, English, please. Sorry. Listen, you must get Virtus.pro LAN EPL. Yeah, we're trying to work on that, sir, and we're really trying to fix that. And I mean, you saw what we did, right, with the extra spot and the expanding the league, and then the fan vote. I see. The problem is they just still didn't win the matches. Okay, I understand. Next season, though. Next season, Virtus.pro. Yeah, next season. They hang up the phone, right? And then they go, I thought I could have gone really a lot worse. Suddenly, like, that phone rings again. Dring. Like, hello? Not as Vincent. Wait, is this the same guy? Yes. What problem? Okay, fair enough. Not as Vincent. EPL next season. Yeah. Listen, I went through that before. If you are indeed the same guy. I don't know why you'd be the same guy. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Wait a minute, you don't actually own Navi, do you? Likeness rights. Fair play, okay. Ding, and that's the end of that segment there, was. There was a lot stacked in there. There was a lot of allusions, a lot of Easter eggs there for people to figure out.
It's deep.
Please don't kill us. Please don't kill us.
It's a good thing we're not actually at Epicenter right now.
It is.
This could have gone horribly wrong.
It is. That would be pretty edgy to then just go up the next day like, all right, guys, how you guys all doing here? You are Russian as well, yeah? Yep. Okay.
We saw you record. We know there's a segment you recorded where you were saying that we have behind the scenes power to wield influence, and you're just like, well, we haven't released the video yet. How'd you see it? And they just have cameras all in these rooms. We're just constantly under surveillance.
Well, after you say that, like, wait a minute, we didn't release the video yet. The guy just like throws a smoke bomb at the floor and just like ninja rolls out of the. Who was that guy? What guy? Was no guy. You never saw guy. Stop talking guy. Just like. Then some guy just walks up that you never seen before. I am Igor. I am Guy. What even is this? Like, are you sure? Maybe it was me. Yeah, I think it could have been. You are right. Like, brilliant. Yeah, great. And scene. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's just a misunderstanding with most of the community because I got a couple tweets like that. I mean, I know you retweeted the same one I'm thinking of people who just don't like understand like the difference between playing online and playing on LAN from professional aspect. And I think a lot of people really underestimate the differences in how the game plays because everything's different. Things work online that don't work on LAN, whether it's the netcode, whether it's players actually having the balls to do things on LAN that they do online, which, as we know, there have been plenty of players in history who are good online and shit on LAN, not because they cheat, but just because they change their playstyle so differently when they get nervous, when they get under pressure, when they're on a stage.
Well, here's a question for you, Moses. I'll give you a good one, okay, from your era. So there was actually something like, I think off the top of my head, there was something like 14 or 15 Cal Invite seasons, right? And what happened was, in the early days, X-Ray existed. So they won the first couple, And then we had Team 3D. So Team 3D and TSO, these teams won. These are all legit LAN teams, right? But then after that, we had teams winning like Rival, who then were dog shit on LAN. They never even made like top placings when they had that lineup, the one that won the one that was before they got Fear and all those guys. And then later on, like I think Weekend Warriors won a season. And the whole point is, you see, as we're going on, you had teams like TSG won a season again, but with the lineup that had Tricked or whatever that guy's name, what was it? Trickery or some shit. Like the one that never was good. It wasn't the one with like Sunman or all the rest of it. So the point is, eventually it got so that actually not many of the really good LAN teams ever won. Like for example, your team, United 5, had a couple of seasons where you were hands down one of the best in NA. I don't think you made a final of one. I think you lost in like the semis every time or something, right?
Of the Cal seasons?
Yeah.
We lost in the... Yeah, we lost to 3, I think, in the first round of the playoffs, our first season, and then we lost to, I think it was the Gamer Co team in one other playoff season.
So you can see the point I'm getting at is like it's not like the key thing about this is me and Moses aren't just watching CSGO now in EPL for 3 seasons or whatever. We've watched all of CSGO over history and all called Counter-Strike. And in general, yeah, it's true. The better teams tend to make it deeper and tend to have a chance to win the league and also. But in general, there are always, I mean, there's a startling amount of upsets, put it that way, right? That don't happen on LAN.
I will tell you from my own personal experience, and you know all about this. I played with TEC Tech. And we went undefeated in an online season of Cal Invite.
How'd the CPL work out?
Yeah, we got shit on. We had we got spanked pretty handily by what was it? Who did we lose to though? This was
Mouse
so
Spots.
Embarrassing.
On Inferno, I think Mouse Spots won
that Tech team. No, we lost actually to a good team there. That was I forget who that was. That was the team with Tentpole. It was Karn was in it, and at Tentpole it was like
Big Grip.
Yeah, Big Grip, and they went on to get like top 6 or something at that event. Yeah, okay. But the second team who knocked us out was SK. Except it wasn't SK Sweden, it was SK Germany, who the fuck at the time knew.
Jesus Christ, that's bad. That's bad.
But the reason why we lost to that LAN and did so good online is because we had a guy named Elude who was a badass online, and it's not because he cheated, it's because of his style of play, loved being aggressive, loved to peek and take every single fight because he was a Texas player, and at the time everyone had to play in central servers because the internet wasn't good enough for even West Coast to East Coast to be able to play. I mean, it was worse than it is now. It still isn't that great in the States, West East Coast, but we all played central servers, which means Texas players had like 8 ping, and everyone else in the world everyone else in the country was playing with like 50 plus, 60 plus ping, and that's being generous. So the things he's able to do, the fights he's able to win online with 5 ping versus 60 are phenomenal. Well, he uses that style of play on LAN when everyone has 5 ping, and he gets shit on because that is a very style that is 50-50. It's all aim duels. So he wasn't as effective.
And I think in his career, they went to every CPL they could. I think they never placed top 8. I think like 9th to 12th or something was the best they ever got. I don't think they ever made a top 8.
I think that only happened like once.
That was the first one.
The majority of his was like 17 to 24
No,
places.
there were some bad ones, right?
Yeah, probably.
So anyway, that's a pretty good example. Right? I think that's pretty much the end of the episode. We'll talk about all the stuff. Goodbye, everyone.